Hey guys. This is part 4 of What If Naruto Was Trained by Kurama. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 11, Short-Lived Secrecy. Early morning in Naruto's apartment. Okay, self-checklist time. Naruto thought while staring at the crimson fur covering his clawed right hand and forearm as he heard another knocking at the front door. Do you really have to do that right now? Kurama shouted nervously from inside the seal. She wasn't looking forward to seeing anyone's reaction to her container displaying her characteristics physically on his body. She could only hope whoever was at the door was a friendly. I absorbed the fox's chakra from Anko-san's crappy seal last night. Naruto ignored Kurama's rant as he kept going down his list. Don't talk as if I'm not here, damn it. I pass out in pain as soon as we got home. Kurama laughed uproariously. You screamed like a pussy too. Then again, not everyone can say they stayed conscious feeling like their entire body was on fire from inside out for at least 10 minutes before finally passing out. Naruto developed an annoyed tick on his left temple as he heard the fox's insult before continuing, flexing his fur-covered right hand in front of his face. I wake up to see my right hand covered in fur, soft and luscious. Kurama cut in with no small amount of pride in her voice. Sigh, soft and luscious fur similar in color to the demon fox sealed inside me. I said don't talk as if I'm not here. And now I'm hearing knocking at the front door, and said demon fox is bitching at me like there's no tomorrow. Oi, you bastard! Naruto ignored more of the demon fox's cursing as he got himself up despite still feeling some soreness from last night's episode. He checked all over his body for any other sign, but it looked like only his right hand was transformed. He then heard another knocking at the front door, this time impatient and harsher. Okay, let's see if we can't get rid of this, he quietly murmured as he stared at his right hand and began to concentrate on diverting most of his chakra away from his right arm, only leaving the bare minimum. The effect was almost instantaneous when the fur and the claws retracted immediately, turning his right hand back to normal. He then allowed the usual amount of his own chakra to flow back in, and nothing happened this time. He assumed it was probably just some leftover demonic chakra from last night's episode that caused this before he expelled it. So he really did transform using the demon fox's chakra. Huh. That actually worked out okay. Kurama snapped out of her rant long enough to say this, sounding almost disappointed. What were you expecting to happen? Some sort of a ridiculous situation in which you desperately tried to hide your hand using whatever means possible as you had to let whoever's at the front door in, and it just gets more silly as time goes on. Naruto raised an eyebrow with an amused smirk. Is my life really like a crappy sitcom to you? Yes it is. Chuckling, he turned to the door and began walking toward it slowly, wondering who would visit him. He assumed it to be the Hokage coming to check on him after hearing the report from the Bourmaster NBU about the assault on Anko and her subsequent rescue by him. However, instinct screamed at him to save himself as he was about to reach for the doorknob, and he was already bending back into a backflip before he even realized it. Only that saved him from a possibly fatal wound when the blade of a ninjato suddenly pierced through the door toward where the boy's throat would have been if he had been unaware. Naruto did 2 backward somersaults down the entrance hallway before landing and blurring through hand seals almost by reflex. Katon Hao Senka, mystical phoenix fire! He whispered before inhaling quickly to spit out 3 small fire projectiles toward the door. It shattered into many fiery pieces, and they blew out onto the apartment building's overgrown front yard below, allowing the cool morning air to blow into the apartment. It was apparent to Naruto that no one was behind the door when he blew it away. Looking around warily, he jumped in fright when the large living room window shattered with a thunderous crash as an unknown person leapt through it toward the shocked boy. It was thanks to years of practicing Raging Fox that the boy acrobatically jumped to the side at the last minute, horizontally twirling his body a few times, as he avoided a vicious overhead sword strike before landing on his feet. In the next instant, he jumped forward low to the floor into the living room from the hallway to avoid a horizontal slash aimed at where his neck was an instant before. He then went into a roll on the floor before springing out of it and latching to the opposite wall from the attacker with chakra. Taking advantage of the momentary lapse, he finally got a good look at the intruder. "And then Nico-san!" Naruto exclaimed in shock as he looked over the curvaceous figure of the purple-haired female fully decked out in her ANBU outfit, complete with the cat mask. She slowly turned toward her opponent after she had missed her initial attacks, and Naruto could feel anger and murderous intent rolling off her. What's going on? What did I do to piss you off? He tried to ask, before he had to jump up to the ceiling to avoid an almost instantaneous stab at his previous position. He then had to scramble across the ceiling with chakra like a spider, as he dodged a flurry of sword slashes, which cut the ceiling into ribbons, from the cat-masked woman. He made his way back into a hallway before dropping to the floor and turning around to see the woman stand still in the middle of the living room, her sword slightly trembling as she shook with rage. The cut pieces of the ceiling hung around her, as if they were morbid streamers celebrating his inevitable murder. You're saying you don't know what you did? The woman growled in anger, as she brandished her sword threateningly toward the blonde. I'm pretty sure I'd know if I did something to piss someone off this much. He deadpanned. His nonchalant response only served to incense the woman further, as she dashed toward him, rearing her sword back to slash at him. Thanking the fact he didn't undress from last night, and still had his shinobi gear on him, Naruto quickly tossed something from his waist pouch toward the attacking woman. Screeching to a halt, Nico only had time to register that this slow-moving projectile was a small smoke bomb before it exploded on impact with her mask. Her mask protected her eyes and nose from any kind of irritation, but the small smoke cloud was enough to blind her for a moment. Naruto didn't waste this chance as he vanished down the hallway toward the back of his apartment. The female ANBU got over her momentary blindness to see her target had disappeared. Cursing inwardly, she began to slowly stalk her way down the hallway as if she was a predator looking for her prey, her sword out in front of her and ready to cut anything. A disembodied voice echoed all around her in the hallway, making her slightly flinch. I just figured out something. When I took Anko-san to her apartment last night, I thought there was a familiar scent there, but I couldn't place it until now. It was the same sword cleaning kit scent I'm smelling on you. There were also pictures of you with Anko-san at her place. It's easy to tell with your hair color. You're close to her, aren't you? The ANBU growled at being identified so easily but didn't say anything as she continued her painfully slow trek down the hallway, noting 2 doors, one each on the sides, aside from the bedroom door at the end. She assumed one of them to be for the bathroom. She didn't know where the second door led to. I'll take that as a yes. Now then, I believe your anger with me has something to do with what happened last night. Otherwise, there's no explanation for you coming here trying to shove your sword up my ass. The only thing is, I don't remember doing anything to piss off anyone. Before we resume battling, I would like an explanation on that oh-so-important issue. Enraged at Naruto's continued ignorance, the female ANBU abruptly ripped her mask off to reveal a beautiful feminine face framed by long purple bangs that went down to her impressively large chest. Her exotic slatted chocolate brown eyes would have been warm and attractive if they weren't burning with anger at the moment. Her small and slightly full lips were enhanced with some bright red lipstick, a stark contrast against her pale and flawless skin. Naruto had to fight to keep his breath from hitching, lest that would have given his hiding spot away. This woman was right up there with the most beautiful he had seen so far in his short life. The unmasked ANBU began speaking calmly as she hung her mask at her waist, but kept her sword up cautiously. Now that you've seen pictures of me at my apartment, there's no point hiding my face from you. My name's Yuzuki Yugao, and Anko-chan's been my surrogate little sister for 6 years since she came back to the village from Dash. Naruto noticed this pause. Somewhere. Because of some issues, her life's been very difficult, and I swore to myself I'd protect my little sister from any harm. That includes you after you took advantage of her last night. A long silence followed Yugo's accusation. Huh! Was Naruto's intelligent reply, which made the woman growl. Don't play dumb with me. I come back from my night shift patrolling around the village only to have Boar tell me that Anko-chan got assaulted and that you were taking her home. I left right away for home, and when I arrived, what did I find? Yugao almost shouted at the end. Naruto was still waiting in confused silence for the punchline. The irritated woman pressed on. Are you really going to be this evasive? She was shirtless. Her flak vest was on the floor. She was knocked out, and maybe you couldn't contain your curiosity and had a look, but it's still unforgivable. What? I did nothing to her. I did do something when we got to your apartment, but that wasn't whatever you were thinking. Please believe me. Naruto stammered, trying to defuse the situation now that he knew what was going on. Meanwhile, Kurama was cackling in his head. Forget what I said earlier. This is a much better sitcom moment to watch. A massive misunderstanding going on between an enraged and irrational woman and a boy who couldn't explain his way out of a wet paper bag. Oh really? Her pink silk bra was already discarded when I got there. Are you really sure you didn't see anything? Yugao demanded. No way. Besides, it wasn't pink silk, it was purple lace-AHA. Shit! Naruto cursed as he realized he was tricked. You can be such a gullible fool sometimes. Kurama chuckled in his head to his annoyance. I'm going to find you and stab you repeatedly, then haul you in front of Anko-chan when she wakes up so she can finish you off to preserve her honor. Take it like a man. Yugao resumed her slow stalking toward the bedroom door, stepping past the first door on the left. What's with you and stabbing with pointy things? And I'm still 12 years old. You'll be a man before long, and that's good enough for me. Come out. Yugao challenged as she gingerly made her slow trek toward the bedroom, her sword still held with tension. She was convinced that her prey was hiding in the bedroom. Naruto let out a dejected sigh. Fine, you leave me no choice. I'll just beat you up a little so I can have you actually listen to my side of the story. His resigned voice echoed around Yugao, which made her pause momentarily. There was no false bravado in his voice. He was confident he could get one over her, an elite ANBU swordswoman. That made her slightly nervous for the first time since she entered the apartment. Still, she chuckled. You forget you're just a child up against an elite sword expert. Even with your training, you won't beat me. She shivered as she practically felt Naruto's lips form into an annoying smirk. That would be true seeing I haven't found some sabers yet, and the practice swords I have won't do anything against you. However, you made a mistake when you came in here. There was a pause for a few seconds to let the words sink in, before he finished. You stepped into my turf. On that cue, as Yugao made one more step toward the bedroom passing the second door on the right, a certain spot on the right wall of the hallway began to shimmer just behind the woman to reveal the blonde coming out of the transparent escape jutsu he learned from his godfather. Another Naruto shimmered out of invisibility higher up on the opposite wall, sticking to it with chakra on his back. Finally, the last Naruto appeared sticking to the ceiling like a spider just above Yugao's head. The Naruto on the ceiling flashed a smirk before he silently dropped, preparing to subdue Yugao. Unfortunately for him, the ANBU felt the intention and instinctively stabbed upward with her sword, skewering him in the air easily. The boy's shocked look made her flinch, and she briefly wondered if she might have taken this too far, only to become alarmed when he smirked evilly before dispelling into smoke, revealing this one to be a shadow clone. Before Yugao could react, she was struck hard on her right shoulder from behind when the second Naruto jumped off the wall toward her with a flying kick. It then dispelled on impact. It didn't knock her over, but it made her lose her grip on her sword momentarily. That was all the real Naruto, standing in front of the bedroom door cloaked, needed as he dropped the jutsu and dashed forward to jump and kick up at the hilt of the woman's sword before she could recover. It knocked the sword up out of her grip to stick deep into the ceiling above, depriving the female ANBU of her primary weapon. Naruto, still in the air from the jump, spun around once before thrusting out his leg to land squarely on the woman's chest, making her stumble backward down the hall. Yugao grunted in frustration at her own arrogance putting her at a disadvantage early, but she wouldn't give up. She quickly recovered and put her hands up in a defensive pose, prepared for whatever Naruto was going to do next as he landed gracefully and strode toward her with a confident look on his face. Unfortunately, she was too focused on the real Naruto to notice the third clone on the floor behind her as it kicked hard at the back of her right knee. It automatically made her fall to the floor on that knee before she even knew what was happening. Before Yugao could recover, she felt a hand wrap around her delicate neck as Naruto stepped past her. The boy grunted with exertion as he pulled her backward to fling her. Before she knew it, she was flying toward the first hallway door she passed, now held open by a clone. The clone grinned and waved daintily at her as she flew through the door and tumbled down some stairs, before it closed the door. Groaning in pain from the fall and coughing a little at the pressure the boy momentarily exerted on her throat for the throw, it took her a moment to realize that she could not see anything as she pushed herself up off the cold and damp floor. It was pitch black all around her. Feeling some growing discontent, she suppressed it as she focused on her training. She strained to listen for any slightest noise as she waited for her vision to try to adjust to the darkness. Before long, multiple beams of bright lights flooded the room, making her put a hand up to shield her eyes as she winced. A booming voice echoed throughout the brightly lit room, making Yugao shift into a stiff defensive posture. Welcome to the bottom floor. Since all the tenants and even the landlord abandoned this building due to my unique status, I have free run of this entire building. I converted this entire floor into my personal trap room for anyone stupid enough to try to invade my home. That would include you. Yugao narrowed her eyes at the insult, but wouldn't move or respond. Since you're the 10th guest to experience this unique attraction, you've won a prize, which is dash. Yugao could practically feel Naruto's sinister grin as if it was the Kyuubi's. An extra 15 minutes added to the usual 30 minutes tour of the Uzumaki House of Horrors. The lights then shut off just after the boy's announcement, and the room fell into complete darkness once again. A moment later, a sound that no one would expect to hear from Yugao came out when a shrill and girly scream, first of many, echoed throughout the dark room. 45 minutes later, the third Hokage was rather concerned. Last night, when he heard the report from Borsen that Naruto decimated 3 Chunin by himself to rescue Mitarashi Enko from a terrible experience, he was proud. That was before he realized the boy rescued her in an area he rarely passed by. There was absolutely no reason for him to just happen to come upon the scene, so the Hokage deduced something lured him there last night. As he pondered over what that was, he decided to stop by and visit the boy the next day. Now, as the third Hokage walked up to the boy's apartment building, he noticed something peculiar. The overgrown front yard was smoldering with small fires spreading everywhere. Not too alarmed by that, he snapped his fingers for an ANBU to appear at his side. No command was needed as the ANBU guard simply flashed through hand seals to call up a low-powered water jutsu to put out the fire. Continuing into the building and upstairs, Hiruzen became a little more cautious when he noticed the window to the living room was shattered and the front door was blasted outward, leaving only 2 small burning pieces of wood around the hinges. He quickly stepped into the apartment to find the place a total mess, as if a battle happened. Before the old man could become genuinely worried for the boy's well-being, one of the hallway's doors slammed open, attracting the attention of the Hokage and the 2 ANBU guards behind him. They heard grunts of exertion as if something heavy was being carried, then they heard a voice. Every ANBU can assassinate a flea from 100 meters. They take on S-ranked missions without flinching. All of you strike fear into the hearts of hardened enemy shinobi everywhere. Yet, why the hell do you guys have a problem with taking a 12-year-old like me down? I'd actually be disappointed in your performance if it didn't mean bad news for me if I lost. The Hokage smirked as he felt the 2 ANBU behind him flinch with slight indignation at what was said. The blonde finally came into view carrying a tied-up female adult over his shoulder. He noticed the Hokage standing at the front doorway and sighed. Sorry, Hokage Gigi. This idiot came into my home wanting to introduce her sword to my stomach and I had to defend myself. The boy grumbled as he nonchalantly tossed the body with a thud at the feet of the Hokage. The third took a moment to see who it was, and was surprised to see it was Yugao, one of the top ANBU operatives under his command. She was covered from head to toe in a mixture of bright-colored paints and various insects, which made her squirm against the rope binding her tightly. He also noticed an overpowering smell of used ramen broth wafting from her entire body. He also realized why she couldn't talk just yet, as she was gagged with some cloth in her mouth. She stared up at the Hokage with shame in her eyes and an embarrassed blush on her cheeks, while the 2 ANBU behind the Hokage shook as they tried with all their might to hold in their laughter. He sighed and smiled gently. Uzumaki House of Horrors? He simply asked. The woman trembled at the memory of what was done to her just a moment ago before she slowly nodded, her shame growing. No need to be so ashamed. You're not alone. He got me in there once when I tried to punish him one time by forbidding ramen a couple years ago, said Boy Harumphed. No one messes with my already limited ramen intake, Naruto declared as he crossed his arms defiantly. The Hokage chuckled for a moment before his expression became deadly serious, making Naruto step backward involuntarily under the steely gaze he was getting. Now I would like an explanation for this, and also for why you happened to come upon Enko-chan while she was being assaulted. Your guard Borsen said you were kilometers away and you had no reason to be in the area where the incident happened. That was before you suddenly ran at full speed in a straight line toward Enko-chan as if you knew something was happening to her. This made Yugao's eyes widen and somewhat grateful to the boy, because any other way would have ended up with her beloved surrogate sister broken beyond recovery. Naruto sighed before he bent down to untie the purple-haired woman, surprising her. Now that I've calmed Yugao-san down, I'd like to let her get cleaned up, then I'll tell you everything when she's done, since she needs to hear this as well. I don't feel like repeating myself. In the meantime, would any of you like some tea? Naruto nonchalantly asked with a friendly smile as the chilly morning wind from the shattered living room window and the non-existent front door whipped throughout the apartment, sending debris fluttering around everywhere. The Hokage and the two ANBU escorts sweat dropped as they glanced down at Yugao with deadpan expressions, making her curl up in embarrassment. 15 minutes later. Cold! A feminine voice shrieked from the bathroom as Naruto set a cup of tea down in front of the Hokage sitting at the flimsy kitchen table. The blonde snickered. Sorry, Yugao-san, I forgot to tell you there's been no hot water in this place for a couple years. I've gotten used to it. The boy shouted down the hall to the bathroom. You did that on purpose? Yugo's voice accused. If you want to go through the streets and into your home smelling like years-old ramen broth, be my guest. I'm sure Anko-san would love that. There was silence, then some resigned grumbling from the bathroom making Naruto and Hiruzen smile. The old man took a sip out of his cup of tea. This is quite good, he observed, genuinely impressed. We concur, a voice echoed from the living room. They looked over to see the two masked ANBU escorts from earlier sitting comfortably on the couch as they held their cups up in salute to Naruto. The blonde chuckled. When you have a demon fox sensei force you to eat more healthy, you learn how to cook better. It also helps when I had Hayashi-sama and Hinata-chan around to teach me the art of making good tea. The other three nodded in understanding. I have to ask though, how the hell are you drinking with your masks on? Naruto wanted to know. The two ANBU glanced at each other before looking over at the boy. He could feel their grins under the masks. Wouldn't you like to know? It's a trade secret. We have Kakashi-senpai to thank for that. One of them spoke as the three older men smiled at the boy's annoyed expression. It figures Kakashi-sensei had something to do with this. I've been watching him eat every single meal last summer break and I still couldn't figure out how the hell he was eating with the face mask still on. He complained. The Hokage chuckled for a moment before he became a little concerned about something. Naruto-kun, you said you haven't had hot water here for years. Are you unable to afford the bill? The third's insides twisted as he saw the boy's expression flash to anger for a moment, and he knew it wasn't about the money. They said they were turning off the gas line to this place since it's abandoned and they don't have a reason to believe a homeless orphan like me is living here legally, even though I still pay my monthly rent to the landlord who doesn't even live here. The Hokage narrowed his eyes in anger at this boy's continued discrimination. Then how are you getting gas for cooking? You just prepared hot tea for us. Naruto walked over to open a cabinet door next to the stove, revealing a large white tank hidden in there. I jury-rigged a propane tank to the stove. It takes too much gas for showering, so I just left that alone. The Hokage sighed tiredly. He had thought he stamped out most of the boy's discrimination when he threatened the markets and restaurants into treating Naruto like a normal customer. Apparently he forgot about the utility companies. At least you're getting electricity and water. The old man and even the two ANBU growled when they saw the boy flinch nervously. I'll ask how you're getting them, the third said evenly as he glared at the boy expecting an answer. All right. I managed to get electricity from the main transformer in the area after some trial and error. In a related matter, my clones refuse to have anything to do with electrical work. As for the water, it's just a matter of going down into the sewers to find the valves to allow water flow to here without the company knowing. Again, in a related matter, my clones refuse to go down any manhole. The boy explained as his face scrunched up at the memories he got from his clones at those times. This is unacceptable. Why didn't you tell me, Naruto-kun? Hiruzen demanded as he forcefully set his teacup down on the table. Because I don't want to come to you with every problem I have. If I think I can work around it, I just don't find it necessary to ask you or anyone else for help, Hokage-jiji. Naruto replied with a steady gaze as the old man sighed. All right. Now that I know what's going on, I will not allow this. We'll discuss this when you return from the trip with Jiraiya-kun. Is that clear? Naruto just shrugged and nodded unenthusiastically when Yugao's voice emitted from the bathroom. Naruto-san, the pants barely fit, but are you sure this shirt is the only one you have that would fit me? It's the biggest size I have. Before Hokage-jiji here got the clothing shops to sell anything to me at regular prices, I was scavenging for any discarded clothing. Luckily for you, I kept some of them. It should fit you since it's a large. It's a large for a child. My breasts are going to pop out. Immediately, all three older men sported nosebleeds. The Hokage's was obvious while one could notice the two ANBU's nosebleeds underneath their masks if they saw a trail of blood going down their necks. Naruto sighed in annoyance before shouting down the hall. All right. You can also have one of my jackets. It's oversized and should cover you up enough. You can keep it. That orange monstrosity. Look, It's either you causing neck injuries on the streets as every man within a mile snapped their heads toward you to watch with hope for your girls to pop out, or wear my orange monstrosity. There was silence before they all heard a mumbled okay. Naruto noticed the other 3 men glaring at him in annoyance. What? I'm not a pervert like you 3. I'm not going to force her to come out in that shirt if it's embarrassing for her. A moment later, a blushing Yugao finally stepped out of the bathroom in a pair of black A&BU style pants, still a size or two too small for her, so they were tied around her long and slender legs and her curvaceous hips. In the right lighting, one could see every curve of her plump rear end easily. Naruto's orange jacket barely covered her torso entirely as her navel was exposed slightly and her well-endowed breasts strained against the chest area, threatening to have the zipper seam burst open. To top all this off, her damp hair was slightly curly and alluring, and some of it was sticking to her face and neck in a sexy manner. All the men had one thought. Wow, it's not as big a step down from the tight t-shirt as I thought. Thank you, Kami-sama, for this wondrous sight. Yugao glared heatedly at the 3 older men, making them flinch and glance away as they wondered how she knew what they were thinking. She then sighed before turning toward Naruto sitting next to her superior at the kitchen table. Now I want an explanation from start to finish in detail, Naruto-san. If I don't like what you have to say, I'll just say you surprised me the first time because I underestimated you. It won't happen again. An hour of explanations later, Naruto sat still in his seat at the table as he stared across at the stunned visages of the Hokage and Yugao. The A&BU escorts left long ago, sent out by the Hokage to avoid the sensitive details of what happened last night being overheard by too many people. As the boy expected, the old man's stunned expression slowly shifted into a frown. It was obvious his surrogate grandfather didn't approve of his recklessness, even though this resulted in Enko finally being free of the curse mark's effects. Yugao's reaction, on the other hand, was unexpected in the boy's mind. He had expected her to get angry at him for risking Enko's health. He didn't expect the woman's mouth to be agape and her eyes wide open in a desperate stare at him as they slowly became watery. Why you be broke that S-snake's curse on her? Tell me why you're not joking, Naruto-san. Her voice trembled as she stared intently at the boy for any sign of deceit. The boy shifted nervously under her hungry gaze, before he flinched when she stood to her feet to lean over the table, her face inches from his. Her chair clattered back noisily from the action. Tell me you're not joking right now! She screamed, desperate for this to be true. At this point, tears began to form at the outer corners of her beautiful chocolate-brown eyes. Naruto fixed his steely gaze with hers, all trace of his previous nervousness gone. I'm not joking. I would never do that when it's something this serious. It's gone. Totally destroyed. I corrupted it with the fox's chakra and I watched it shatter into a million pieces and they just disappeared from Enko-san's skin. After that she relaxed immediately and seemed to be sleeping contentedly when I left her. The last sentence struck Yugao deeply. Her pupils shrank as she realized something she didn't notice when she first checked up on the still sleeping Enko. Her younger surrogate sister wasn't thrashing around and breaking out in cold sweat like she did most nights when the curse mark caused her horrible nightmares. Keeping her gaze trained on Naruto, Yugao slowly stepped around the table to his side and just let herself sink numbly to her knees to get her level with the seated boy. Naruto was wondering what was going on before he was pulled into a bone-crushing hug as Yugao wrapped herself tightly around the boy's frame, her face buried in his neck. He blushed bright red at feeling her large chest pressed tightly against his before he sobered up upon hearing quiet sobs from the purple-haired woman. You have no idea how much Enko-chan suffered with that curse mark for years. Not only does it show others that she was tainted by that fucking traitor, it made her suffer so much by whispering dark thoughts into her mind that she had to ignore all the time, and it was giving her horrible nightmares nearly every night. Just hearing her describe one of her nightmares kept me up for nights. There were days that she nearly went insane and just wanted to kill everyone, and I had to talk her down. I nearly lost myself to despair several times listening to her cries and whimpers nearly every night, and I couldn't do anything about it but be helpless. Thank you so much, Uzumaki Naruto. The woman softly whispered next to the boy's ear as she continued to squeeze the boy tightly in her embrace. Naruto could only smile gently as he softly patted the trembling woman on her back. He then shifted his gaze over to the third, who was still frowning non-approvingly. While I'm glad you've managed to rid Enko-chan of her greatest suffering, I still feel you were reckless in doing this, Naruto-kun. Dealing with an unknown seal require a delicate approach since we do not know what could happen if we made a mistake in the process of removing it. From the way you described it, you just went at it with brute force hoping it'd work. You put one of my best subordinates at risk doing that. You'll understand my disapproval of this," he said evenly as he narrowed his eyes. "I know, Hokage Jiji. I would never have tried that before I learned one thing a few months ago." Naruto calmly spoke as the sobbing Yugao continued to hug him tightly, still feeling she hadn't shown him enough gratitude. The Hokage raised an eyebrow. "Something to do with the Kyuubi, I presume?" Naruto smirked. "Flashback a few months ago, that's odd," Naruto thought as he looked down at a sizzling piece of paper. He was sitting cross-legged in the middle of his living room. All four walls, the floor, and even some of the ceiling were covered with papers with random scribblings. He was experimenting with seals, and he had encased his entire room in a privacy barrier since he didn't want anyone else to get a glimpse of his experiments. "That's an interesting result." Kurama suddenly spoke up from inside her seal. "Yes. This storage seal should be able to store chakra, but when I tried to channel your chakra into the seal, it just fizzled out. I was hoping to see if using your chakra instead of my own would change anything. Let's try something else. Create a clone with some of my chakra for it to use, and get out an activated exploding tag." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "The clone isn't going to like that. Luckily you can order it around." "Do it." He sighed and created a frowning clone, who already began protesting immediately. After a minute of arguing and convincing it that it wasn't going to feel any pain anyway, the clone relented before they went downstairs into the trap room to get away from damaging sensitive documents in the living room. They activated another privacy barrier before the original placed an activated exploding tag in the middle of the room and stepped off to the side far enough from the tag's range. The clone nervously stepped up and bent down to carefully touch the tag in order to channel some of the demon fox's chakra directly into it. The clone closed its eyes as it expected to be blown to bits. When nothing happened for a few seconds, its eyes popped wide open to see the exploding tag fizzle out as if it was a dud. It then jumped around and celebrated its continued existence while Naruto observed the tag with an intrigued eyebrow. He then procured another exploding tag, a much more powerful one this time. The clone's mood took a nosedive as it noted the new tag in its creator's hand. After a few minutes of nerve-wracking experience, the traumatized and twitching clone dispelled itself without permission after the fifth test. "Not like I needed you anymore," Naruto muttered as he looked over 5 fizzled exploding tags. "So the first tag wasn't just a lucky dud then. My chakra corrupts seals activated with human chakra. That would be a fantastic development, but we have to test more different kinds of seals before we come to that definite conclusion. I wonder about the seal on my stomach though. Your chakra should have destroyed it, if it was activated by Dad. It must have been because it was powered by the Shinigami that your seal can contain me easily. As for my other siblings, the humans likely used their own chakra to power their sealing arrays in order to avoid the risk of corruption. So as long as I figure out how to activate any seal array with your chakra instead of mine, the seal shouldn't be corrupted that way. That's the theory, and we have a lot of testing to do." To the lab. Flashback end. "After that, we broke every seal array we could create so badly, it's scary. Storage, elemental, weapon, barrier, privacy, trap, the list goes on. They're all pathetic before the fox's chakra. Also, just to be sure it wasn't just my chakra that the fox's chakra could only break, we borrowed and tested several seals powered by various people's chakra throughout the village. Same results. That's why I felt somewhat confident about breaking Enko-san's seal, even if it was more advanced and complex than what I've managed to test so far." Naruto finished the explanation with a somber look. The Hokage stared at Naruto in pale-faced shock. Yugao had let go of Naruto while he was in the middle of his explanation, and was looking at him with an impressed look. "Why, you realize what this means?" the old man murmured in a low whisper. Naruto just nodded with a serious look. "Hokage-sama, you sound like you weren't pleased about this," Yugao quizzed with her head cocked in confusion. Naruto snorted. "It means my life would be in even more danger if people found out about this," he said dismissively as if he was talking about the weather. Yugao narrowed her eyes as she looked over at the Hokage, hoping for a contradiction only to see him nodding his head gravely. Before she could speak more, the Hokage put a hand up for silence with a tense expression. As Naruto and Yugao looked at him, the old man pointed a finger down the hallway. They nodded in understanding before they all moved silently into the bedroom. Within seconds, Naruto activated the room's privacy seal. "Why would Naruto-san have to worry for his life?" Yugao suddenly asked as the barrier rose. Because he most likely stumbled onto the master key for nearly every seal array in existence. I would think that'd be good. If he could infiltrate any village, bypass any sealed room or chest, and is able to get out of trapped seals easily, he'd be a deadly shinobi. Yugao continued, not getting the picture. That's exactly why. That kind of ability won't stay hidden long if we overuse it, and what do you think will happen when other villages find out about him? They'll panic about their security and send legions of assassins after him. I don't even want to think about the people within this village as well. The Hokage spoke with an edge to his voice. Why would we have to worry about our own village? Sure, the villagers don't have much love for Naruto-san, but they don't have much to do with seals. Yugao quizzed as she suddenly realized how much danger Naruto could be in from enemies from outside, but she wasn't sure about what their own village could have to do with this. The Hiraishin scroll, to name just one thing. Naruto suddenly interjected. The Hokage and Yugao looked over at the blonde with surprise, before they nodded in understanding. If it's around, then it's most likely under tight lock and key with multiple seal arrays all over it, only to be opened by a qualified person. The fourth Hokage probably never accounted for the fox's chakra in his seals until when he designed the 4 symbols and 8 trigram seal array for the fox. Naruto theorized. He made sure to leave out any mention of his connection to his father in his previous explanation, and just now since Yugao wasn't privy to that information. I can name at least 5 people that would kidnap you and force you to unseal anything they want in this village for their personal gain. The Hokage growled as he focused his mind on particularly one person, his old teammate Danzo. That's absurd. I won't allow this. Yugao's face twisted into disgust. Good, because I'm declaring this a SS rank secret, Yugao-san. It will not even be recorded anywhere. Only you, Naruto-kun, and I know this, and we will keep it in our heads. As Naruto-kun and I trust Jiraiya-kun implicitly, and this has to do with seals, I will inform him also, and no one else. If anyone else comes to either of you about this, eliminate that person immediately. It will only be verbally passed down to people you trust completely in the future. If, for any reason, you don't trust any new Hokage after me 100%, do not even tell him or her. Naruto-kun, this ability does not officially exist outside of us 3. Is that understood? The powerful third Hokage spoke in a low voice as he glared and spiked his chakra pressure at Yugao and Naruto, who both flinched nervously before saluting with a hand over their hearts and bowing. Yes, Hokage-sama, they said loudly at the same time. The Hokage nodded solemnly before continuing. Naruto-kun, you're to use that ability only if the situation calls for it as a last resort, and be discreet about it. If there were any witness, use your judgment on if you would allow this person to live or not. If not, terminate the person or people with extreme prejudice. I'm serious about this. It's for your, and this village's safety. Naruto sobered as if doused with cold water at being given free rein to kill any witness, but he understood the seriousness of this. Yes, Hokage-sama. The blonde replied less enthusiastically this time. Hiruzen understood his surrogate grandson's reluctance, but he knew the boy would make the right choice either way each time this came up in the future. He then turned toward his female ANBU. Yugao-san, I'm sorry, but the only reason you're even in this discussion is because you happened to hear this by accident, and I needed to make the implications of spreading news of this very clear. Otherwise, it would have been just between Naruto-kun and me if I had anything to say about it. I trust you, so please do not betray my expectations. The woman felt pride in gaining her Hokage's absolute trust as she bowed deeply at her hips. Yes, Hokage-sama. I owe Naruto-san my life for saving my little sister from any further suffering under that damn curse mark. I will never do anything to compromise his safety. I'd like to make a request, if you don't mind. The blonde interjected. The Hokage and Yugao inclined their heads to show they were listening. Please don't tell Enko-san that I broke the seal right away. I don't want her to feel like she owes me anything. Naruto quickly explained the last part as soon as he saw the rebellious look forming on Yugao's face. Why? She should know who freed her from years of misery. She was about to continue ranting when she was stopped by Naruto pointing a finger at her. If your reaction to me breaking the curse was any indication, I don't want to find out how much more extreme her reaction would be. I'm not saying she has to be clueless forever. Just until after she got used to the idea of life without the seal on her, then maybe she'd be more calm about thanking me. Naruto spoke calmly as Yugao blushed slightly at the reminder of her crying and hugging the boy for all he was worth for 30 minutes. He seemed to have a way of making her uncharacteristically unlike her usual stoic demeanor. It will be difficult to keep Anko-chan in the dark. She's going to do everything she can to find out your identity, the Hokage offered. You're welcome to use Ero-sennin in my place. It'd explain why she was shirtless anyway. The two adults flinched at the boy's sinister smirk, as he imagined Anko going after Jiraiya with every kunai on her person for supposedly getting her half naked. The Hokage quickly shook his head. As much as that might be fun to see, Jiraiya-kun was the one who applied the evil sealing method technique. If he couldn't remove the seal back then, she wouldn't believe it was him this time. Besides, you haven't heard Anko go into details many times about how much she would thank the person for removing the curse mark no matter who the person would be, even if it turned out to be a female. She might actually do something she'd regret with Jiraiya-sama. Yugao quickly cut in, her face scrunching up at the image of Anko and Jiraiya going at it. The boy paled at the thought before shaking it off to continue. All the more reason why I shouldn't reveal myself yet. Besides, there's your law, Hokage Jiji. Naruto replied as he looked at the Hokage, who raised an eyebrow indicating this needed further explanation. There's a lot of details about me surrounding this incident that's forbidden by your law, so they cannot be revealed to anyone below Jounin in rank. Last time I checked, Anko-san's a chunin, isn't she? That's a sloppy excuse and you know it. Though it might be enough to keep her off our case for a while until things calm down. I guess we'll have to respect your wishes for now, though you should know we do it with reluctance. The Hokage spoke as he put on a thoughtful expression. Wait a minute! What the hell am I supposed to tell Anko-chan? Yugao interjected loudly. She then trembled under the evil smirks given off by the two males. You figure it out, they both said at the same time. A few minutes later, after Yugao said her goodbye, albeit reluctantly, she left the blonde and the old man alone to go check if Anko had woken up yet. There's something you left out when you explained your situation from last night. What is it? Hiruzen said matter-of-factly when he confirmed there was no one within earshot of them. Naruto put a hand behind his neck nervously. Yeah. Remember when I explained the situation with the Yin half being taken out of the fox and I can't bring out more of her chakra without going crazy because of that? The Hokage nodded quietly, waiting for the punchline. We just found out some of the fox's old chakra with the Yin essence still exists. The old man narrowed his eyes in anger as he connected the dots, and growled. So my ex-student is willing to go so far as to put the Kyuubi's chakra in innocent humans. Naruto nodded to confirm this. That's why I broke the seal, in addition to wanting to stop Anko-san's suffering. I absorbed all the fox's chakra that was in her. This morning, I woke up with this. Naruto brought his right hand up and channeled some of the demon fox's chakra into it. The Hokage watched in amazement as crimson fur suddenly grew out of Naruto's skin on his forearm and hand, and the fingertips sharpened into intimidating-looking claws. Is that all you can transform into at this moment? He finally inquired after spending a long moment looking closely at the boy's arm. I don't know. I wasn't able to test anything before Yugao-sen dropped by unannounced. Naruto grumbled as Hiruzen smiled amusedly at the boy's previous predicament. We have the privacy barrier still up. Go ahead and channel the chakra to everywhere on your body and see what happens. He encouraged, curious if there was more to this new development. Naruto tried this, and the only change was that his left hand also grew the same fur and claws. I haven't tried bringing up my shroud, I wonder if it's different. He pointed out to the Hokage, who allowed further experimentation with a nod of his head. Naruto brought out even more power, enough to form a one-tailed chakra shroud. The Hokage had to hold his ground steady at being next to such a massive presence from the demon fox. The chakra shroud formed almost too quickly, but there was no new physical changes aside from his fur-covered hands. I don't remember it being this easy to bring it out so fast. And I feel slightly less on edge. Usually when I'm using the shroud I get a little aggressive and irritable easily. Now, I actually feel like I can think a bit more clearly. I wonder if I can get more like this the more Yin-infused chakra we find. Naruto commented as he let the shroud dissolve after a moment of observing. So far, the effects seem to be positive, Naruto-kun. I just thought of something and I'd like to take you someplace and see if you can feel something different. The third said as he had the privacy barrier brought down. Naruto, despite being confused, agreed and allowed himself to be taken with his grandfather figure via Shunshin as soon as they stepped outside of the boy's apartment. In a short while, Naruto and the third appeared atop a water tower located high on a building's roof. The blonde glanced around with a confused expression, taking in the new surrounding. There were buildings all around them and Konoha's perimeter wall loomed large over them, casting a long shadow over the entire area in the late morning sunlight. Naruto-kun, what's different about this area? The third mysteriously asked as he looked down at the boy for any reaction. Naruto simply checked around for the Hokage Tower located at the center of the village under the Hokage Monument, usually his point of reference while navigating this large village. He realized right away he was basically on the very opposite side of the village from where he lived. The west side of the village near the entrance to the Hokage Monument was where he always spent most of his life. The orphanage, the academy, the clan's district, his favorite restaurants, his apartment. Everything he ever needed was packed into that section of the village, so Naruto rarely veered over to other sections of the village, especially all the way over here on the east side. I doubt I ever set foot in this area. However, I'm noticing a lot of the buildings around here seem pretty new compared to the older ones I see over by where I live. Is that important? Part of it. Keep guessing if you can. He continued to think intently as he observed anything different about this area, while checking over every building and person walking on the streets below the two. Inside his seal, Kurama grimaced as she realized where they were and almost didn't want her container to find out more about her shameful behavior on the night she was controlled. This part of the giant wall seems to be lighter in color compared to the sections on the sides, like it's been repaired. Naruto observed before he froze in realization. If this section was still destroyed, the hole would have been the size of a certain giant fox. It's where the fox attacked this village, isn't it? It wasn't a question. Yes, Naruto-kun. Before they rebuilt this section, it was mostly destroyed all the way up to that large outdoor market. The third explained as he pointed at a certain building quite a distance behind where they appeared. I didn't bring you here to try to guilt-trip the Kyuubi or anything. I wanted to see if you can feel something in the air like you did when Enko-chan's curse mark flared up. The Hokage clarified. Could have fooled me. The fox grumbled. I think I know what he means to do. He's wondering if we can still find traces of your chakra around here. It'd be difficult. All of these buildings are new, so there would be little to no trace of my chakra from back then. The only thing we can do is try using that technique. Even though it's incomplete, if you try doing it my way, it'll absorb any demonic chakra from the surrounding air like my Bijudama. I can feel very faint traces of my presence all over this place. I just don't know how much of it you can actually absorb. It looks like there are very small traces of the fox's presence here. Because a lot of these buildings and the wall are new, we're not going to find much, if any, chakra to absorb. What about the area beyond the wall? Naruto inquired of the old man, who shook his head. It would be a waste of time. That area was turned into a barren wasteland for a few years when whatever trees were left over from the destruction died out slowly as if something were destroying them. We assumed them to be affected by the Kyuubi's chakra left over from the attack. We had Tenzo forcibly regrow that section of the forest since his wood element's ability to subdue and eliminate demonic chakra is potent. With the chakra-enhanced trees covering the wasteland now, there's only going to be a minuscule amount, if any, of the demon fox's chakra out in that area. Naruto nodded his head before hopping up to the tallest point in the section nearby. The Hokage followed, interested in seeing what the boy was going to do. Hokage Gigi, I'm gonna have to use some of the fox's chakra for this. Though it'd be a small amount, these people aren't going to be happy feeling the fox's presence. I've got that covered, Naruto-kun. The third replied as he snapped his fingers. A bare-masked Anbu appeared at the old man's side in an instant, making Naruto jump slightly. Bear-san, have this section evacuated within minutes. Make up a cover story. I want every regular shinobi and civilian within 100 meters of us in all directions gone in the next 10 minutes. The Anbu bowed and disappeared as quickly as he came. Within seconds, Naruto heard alarmed voices as the civilians below began to be herded out of this section. He could hear people mentioning something about a gas main leaking somewhere in this area. The boy then slowly looked up at the smirking Hokage with stars in his eyes. Being Hokage is awesome! He exclaimed with a childish expression of awe. Hokage-sama, the section has been cleared out. What is your order? Bear reappeared at the Hokage's side on his knee after a few minutes of waiting. Pull back out beyond the 100 meters boundary around us. That includes every Anbu. The only remaining life in this area should be just us two, the third ordered firmly. Bear hesitated for a moment, not wanting to leave the Hokage unprotected, but he decided that should anything happen, the third could handle himself long enough for him and his colleagues to reach him in time. The masked man bowed his head before disappearing again. The Hokage then felt all of the Anbu leaving the area. After a moment, it was just him and Naruto. Okay, go ahead, Naruto-kun. Naruto responded by bringing his right hand straight out in front of him, its palm facing up and fingers curled inward as if he was holding a ball. The Hokage could feel an influx of the demon's chakra moving slowly through his arm before a partial shroud formed around it. Before long, the old man began to see wisps of dark chakra appear from thin air to float aimlessly around the boy's hand. After a long few minutes of more appearing out of thin air, the dark chakra began to whirl and spin into the shape of a small ball, no bigger than a meat bun, floating above Naruto's right palm. The Rasengan! Impossible! The old man murmured in wide-eyed shock. Not really. I still haven't mastered that. Naruto countered as he concentrated on molding the dark chakra into a perfect sphere. The Hokage looked over at his face in surprise. If that's not the Rasengan, I'll eat my hat. Naruto chuckled as he strained to maintain the spherical shape of the dense chakra. Get your ketchup and mustard ready then. This is closer to the fox's Bijudama than the Rasengan. Though I would say this is a mixture of both, I guess. It's just me doing the first step of the Rasengan training when I'm using my cloak. For some reason, it forms using any residual demonic chakra around us instead of my own or the fox's chakra. You're right. It's not spinning as much. Is that all the chakra from around here? Naruto nodded. The fox explained to me that demonic chakra is naturally attracted to a strong source of demonic presence, and it just needed to be directed. That's how all the Bijas seem to have infinite power. They automatically absorb residual malicious chakra from the environment all the time. Anyway, this is my first time doing this out of the mindscape and I'm going to try to absorb this into my body. I may collapse afterward, so you're welcome to drop my body off at my apartment when this is over. Wait. What was the last sentence you just said? The third's voice rose in alarm. Naruto didn't reply as he let his shroud slowly wrap around and surround the black chakra ball. Upon contact, the ball began to disintegrate into the shroud. With pieces of the dark chakra swimming around inside the red shroud, Naruto simply retracted the shroud into his body, absorbing the new chakra in the process. The blonde turned toward the worried Hokage and smiled wide. Success. The world then went black with blinding pain. 15 minutes later, the third sighed in relief as his surrogate grandson seemed to have finally stopped twitching and holding in his screams of pain as he became still. He now began to breathe evenly as if he was in a deep sleep. From how much pain he seemed to be in a moment ago, the old man was amazed the boy hadn't let out a loud scream the entire time. Bending down to check Naruto's body for any damage and finding none, the third decided he would at least put the boy somewhere more comfortable than on a building's rooftop. He decided Naruto's apartment was out as there was no door and a large window was missing. He made a mental note to have the repairs done at Yugao's expenses in the near future. For now, one place came to mind for shelter. He grinned almost mischievously as he easily picked the boy up to drape over his back before setting off in a certain direction. 10 minutes later, Hyuga compound Hyuga Hayashi walked toward the compound's main gate with a raised eyebrow. He was busy training his daughters when one of the guards suddenly interrupted with a message that the Hokage was waiting for him at the gate. Opening the gate, he was surprised to see the Hokage, who was smiling gently, with a certain blonde boy on his back. However, he wasn't the Hyuga clan head for nothing as he kept his features neutral before he bowed slightly and greeted the Hokage. Hokage-sama, you honor me and the clan with your presence at our compound. To what do we owe this visit? My apologies, Lord Hayashi, for stopping by unannounced. I'll only be a few minutes. I have a small favor to ask of you. Certainly. Anything for the Hokage. Naruto-kun here fell unconscious due to a side effect of an incomplete jutsu he was attempting a few minutes ago. However, due to an incident earlier this morning at his apartment, its security has been compromised. We're taking action to remedy that, but in the meantime, I'd like to make sure he's with someone he can trust while he's still in this vulnerable state. Would you be willing to watch over him? It's only until he wakes up. Of course. Naruto-san is always welcome here. Hayashi immediately replied as he nodded for one of the gate's guards to retrieve the unconscious boy off the Hokage's back. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant day and I'll see you around. The Hokage bowed slightly before walking off in the direction of the Hokage Tower. As Hayashi and the guard carrying Naruto entered the compound, the clan head suddenly spoke up. Ryushi-san. Please take Naruto-san to Tomo-san. My daughters are busy training and does not need to know their friend is here in this compound for the time being. Otherwise they would be distracted, especially since he is unconscious. He will be well taken care of by Tomo-san until then. The guard Ryushi raised an eyebrow. Forgive this one's rudeness, my lord, but isn't Tomo-san hosting a clan-wide meeting for women only in the main hall at this moment? He swore he heard his lord mutter even better. But chalk that up to his imagination. She would not mind. In fact, I dare say she would be quite welcoming. Please do this and get back to your post. Hayashi commanded, and Ryushi quickly carried out his orders. As they split up and Hayashi went back to his daughters alone, one would see his incredibly sadistic smirk if anyone were nearby. Early afternoon at the apartment of the Purple Sisters. Ow, what the hell hit me? Mitarashi Enko croaked as she finally woke up, sitting up on the couch as she clutched at her forehead with both hands. As she did this, the blanket that was draped over her last night fell off, exposing her chest still clad in her purple lace bra. I would say a potent drug combined with a couple nasty hits to your stomach from lowlifes. A voice spoke from next to her. Enko stiffened for a moment before realizing who the voice belonged to. She let out a relieved sigh as she turned to look at her surrogate older sister, Yugao, sitting in a chair next to the couch. She was dressed in a normal t-shirt and sport shorts, her usual outfit to get comfortable in when she was home. There was no way she would allow Enko to see what she came home, and so she immediately discarded the outfit Naruto lent to her. Thankfully, only 1 or 2 people saw her on the way home as she exclusively took the rooftops. Did they? Enko let the question hang in the air as she nervously looked at the floor next to the couch. The memories of last night were coming back to her. She didn't feel anything physically wrong with herself other than a slightly sore and bruised stomach, but that didn't mean anything until she got full confirmation. To her immense relief, Yugao quickly shook her head no. After letting relief flood her, Enko instinctively drew her blanket up to cover her chest as if to protect herself from imaginary monsters. She trembled slightly at such a close call as she dug through her memories some more. Seeing her sister begin to withdraw into herself, Yugao put a comforting hand on her shoulder. You were lucky, Enko-chan. In more ways than one. If it wasn't for the Kyuubi's chakra being in you, Naruto-san would never have sensed you being in trouble, and these scums would have had all the time with you. In a way, your curse mark saved you from a terrible experience after trying its best to make you suffer for 5 years. If that's not the definition of irony, then what is? Who saved me? I remember a voice interrupting those pig bastards just when I passed out. Enko murmured more to herself than to her surrogate sister, as she searched through her memories deeply for any clue on who was her savior. Okay, now's the time to start the bullshit. You better appreciate this, Naruto-san. Yugao grumbled in her head. Sorry, Enko-chan. A patrolling ANBU found you alone and unconscious in the alley. There were no one else. Apparently whoever saved you took his or her battle elsewhere. Yugao lied smoothly. All the training she had with the ANBU had to at least count for something today after being unable to put down a 12-year-old boy. A very strong 12-year-old perhaps, but still a boy nonetheless. Enko narrowed her eyes slightly. Yugao may think she's a great liar, but the slight twitching of her right eyelid gave it away. I think my training and interrogation for the TNI department is working out great. She thought excitedly as she figured out ways to trap Yugao and catch her red-handed. She decided to go the simple route. I find that hard to believe. There were 5 guys around me. This person must have been quite strong to be able to get them all away from me. Enko had to fight to hide her devious smirk at springing the trap as she watched Yugao slowly forget about keeping up her cover story while her expression became puzzled. Wait a minute, I was told there were 3 gotcha. Enko whispered with a victorious smile. God damn it! Yugao groaned as she smacked both her palms to her forehead hard. She understood how Naruto felt earlier when she pulled the same trick on him. So there was a witness at least. Tell me who it was that saved me. I know you have that information, Enko said firmly with no humor now. I can't do that, Enko-chan. The person requested to remain anonymous. Yugao replied just as seriously. I don't give a shit about what was requested. I want to know who it is so I can repay this person, and I would do almost anything. It doesn't matter if it was a request, tell me the identity now. Enko almost shouted at her sister. She had no patience to deal with anyone dancing around the answer when she wanted it straight up. Yugao sighed dejectedly and decided to just get the revelation about Enko's now non-existent curse mark out. The sooner she dealt with this, the faster they'd get it out of the way. Maybe that person's right. If you're already this adamant about repaying your savior, I wonder how you're going to be when you find out the same person removed the curse mark. For a moment, It seemed like Anko didn't hear what Yugao just said, but her light brown pupilless eyes slowly shrank in size as the younger woman seemed to be repeatedly going over every single syllable. She instinctively reached up with a hand toward her neck where the curse mark used to be. "You're lying," she quietly said with such conviction that Yugao was almost inclined to believe that the mark somehow reappeared without her noticing. "Why are you lying? This is a sick joke, Yugao-ne." Anko's voice dripped with betrayal, and Yugao felt a little hurt that her surrogate sister thought right away she'd hurt her purposely. "I'm not, Anko-chan. You just woke up, so you probably haven't noticed that the side effects of the mark disappeared. If you need further proof, go look in the mirror," she suggested as she looked intently at Anko for her reactions. The younger woman's lips trembled while her eyes began to water, and her hand was now shaking over where the curse mark was on her neck. "It has to be a trick. There's no way it just disappeared. I've been living with this for years and it just disappears one night, while I wasn't even awake for it. There's no way it could be that easy." Anko's face twisted into despair as she strained to not allow herself to believe this new reality. "Look in the mirror," Yugao ordered firmly. Anko shook her head violently like a child, her fanned purple ponytail swaying. "I can't. What if this is an illusion?" Her voice cracked as her eyes squeezed shut with desperation. "It's not. I'll be right there next to you, okay?" Yugao cooed soothingly as she slowly took her younger sister's hand in hers. It broke her heart to feel Anko's hand tremble violently in her grip as she continued to fight against the new reality. She knew how Anko felt. She had been so traumatized by being tainted with this curse mark that she believed firmly that it would be with her for the rest of her life and had given up on any hope of getting rid of it years ago. For it to just disappear one day was a reality that she never dreamed of at all, and she just wasn't able to bring herself to accept that, finally, something had gone right for her. Yugao slowly stood and gently pulled Anko up with her, letting her blanket fall off. She then gently pulled the half-naked and near catatonic younger woman toward the bathroom. Every once in a while, Anko would tug at her grip as if wanting to break free and stay as far away from any mirror as possible. She would not allow that as she then pushed her increasingly resisting little sister through the bathroom door, both of her hands firmly on the younger girl's bare shoulders. Just as they stood in front of the mirror above the sink, Anko closed her eyes tightly and twisted around in Yugao's grip so that she buried her face in the taller woman's chest like a child would, still refusing to look at the mirror, as if she would be cursed again if she did. Yugao sighed exasperatedly, and smiled gently down at her sister as she began removing the hair clip holding Anko's hair up into its usual fan style as it was frazzled and disheveled from last night anyway. Anko seemed to have calmed down almost immediately in the older woman's embrace when she felt her long hair fall freely down her back and Yugao began to rake a hand through it to smooth it over. The ANBU always knew the best way to calm Anko down was to play with her beautiful purple hair. If one were to look at the women standing together in the bathroom right now, he or she would believe without any doubt they were sisters by blood with their long purple hair flowing down their backs and the long bangs framing their faces. "Anko-chan, I always knew from the moment I met you in that lab that you would be one of the most beautiful women in this village. Perhaps in the entire nations." Yugao cooed like a mother down at Anko, who scoffed lightly against her chest. She smiled amusedly. At least she was listening. "There was just one thing I didn't like," she continued in her gentle voice. Anko stiffened slightly in her embrace but kept calm as she kept raking soothingly through the younger woman's long and silky hair. "It was that ugly and evil mark on your neck left by a monster who I hate with all my being for putting such a wonderful person like you through hell. You didn't deserve all that happened to you since the night you were tricked into leaving the village with him. None of it. That's why I am so proud of you for sticking it out through everything since you came back to the village. I have always hoped your life would turn around someday, and I believe that day has come today." She spoke quietly as she gently turned her little sister around in her embrace to face the mirror. Anko's eyes were still closed tightly, but she didn't seem as nervous as before. "Without the mark on you, I can say with certainty you're the most beautiful young woman in the nations now," Yugao whispered into one of Anko's ears as she lifted some long hair away, clearly showing the smooth and unblemished skin where the mark would have been. At that point, Anko's eyes slowly fluttered open, and she remained still as they quickly focused on the spot where the curse mark was. Yugao could see the light brown irises shrink in disbelief as Anko finally saw the new reality staring her in the face. It's true. I don't see it." Anko's whisper quiet voice trembled as her eyes focused on her neck. Just to be sure, Her eyes searched the rest of her exposed torso in the mirror to confirm that the mark simply hadn't moved elsewhere. She brought her hand up to rub at the original spot with her fingers carefully, afraid she would make it reappear if she was rough. It really is gone. I can't believe it. Her lips slowly parted into a truly happy smile that Yugao rarely saw on her younger sister. Happy tears began flowing freely for both women. I can't believe it. She trailed off as she broke down sobbing. Her older sister simply hugged her tightly from behind with gentle shushing as she wailed louder. Their legs gave out, so Yugao allowed herself to sink down onto the floor with her back against the bathtub across from the sink. She then had Anko cuddle up between her legs against her chest as the long-suffering young woman continued to let out all of the misery she had to hold in for years. Yugao took a moment to inwardly thank one Uzumaki Naruto as she rested her chin on top of Anko's head, and listened to her beloved little sister's soul-cleansing cries filling the small bathroom. Some time later at the Hyuga compound, after she finished her daily training, Hinata heard from her father that Naruto had been here in the compound for a while. After momentarily surprising her father with her annoyed glare for not knowing about her beloved Naruto sooner, she rushed over to the main hall. Bursting through the doors into the meeting hall, her pale eyes came upon a large group of Hyuga women surrounding someone, although she couldn't tell who it was without using her Byakugan. The women glanced over at the new arrival before all of them grinned mischievously as they bowed to the clan heiress. Welcome, Lady Hinata. I presume you came here for Uzumaki-sama. He's over there. One of them spoke, pointing toward the center of the group. Thanking her, the heiress worked her way through the crowd carefully to come upon a strange sight. Naruto was lying unconscious on a large cushion on the floor, surrounded on all sides by 5 or 6 Hyuga women of all age and size as they cuddled up to whatever they could hold on to. From time to time, some of the women that were standing around the cuddling women would step up and complain that it was their turn to cuddle up to the boy. Some of them even got into arguments. Hinata just stared at all of this with a deadpan expression, having no words to express her emotions at the surreal sight she just saw. The Hyuga women finally saw Hinata staring at them with a neutral expression, and they stopped what they were doing, waiting for their heiress' reaction. Tomo, not noticing Hinata yet, popped her head up from cuddling alongside Naruto's right leg. See? I told you Naruto-sama makes the perfect teddy bear. You all just can't keep your hands off him, can you? She exclaimed before she squawked in surprise at seeing Hinata standing over her with a stony expression. Ella, Lady Hinata? Tomo could only squeak out as she glanced guiltily up at the young heiress. Tomo-chan. Hinata trailed off with her long bangs shadowing her eyes. Why, yes? Move over, please. Pardon? That's my spot. All of you can fight over the rest. Hinata spoke firmly with a glare. All the other women burst out laughing after taking a long moment to realize what their recently shy heiress had just said. Tomo was only too happy to relinquish the spot. A few minutes after Hinata settled into her favorite spot, Naruto stirred awake without anyone noticing. Hinata-chan? His low voice called out. He somehow knew Hinata was with him even if he wasn't totally aware of his surroundings yet. Eep! Hinata jolted in surprise as she became bright red and very still, squeezing tightly around his right leg. The other women jumped in surprise too, though they were very reluctant to let go of him as well. Naruto were glancing around at all the women surrounding him with a confused expression before realization dawned on him. Let me guess. Hokage-jiji dropped me off here at your compound. A nod from Hinata. Your dad took me in and decided he would leave me here to be taken care of by all of you. This time, all the women nodded with pink cheeks. Naruto became still with a blank expression for a long moment, making the tension rise a little. Then all the women nearly face-faulted when he just shrugged his shoulders lazily. Whatever. I'll just prank them later. This is actually pretty comfortable. Have your fun. With that, he went back to sleep and the women burst into activity as they began to argue over who would next touch their teddy bear. Back at the Purple Sisters' apartment. I still want to know. Anko suddenly spoke up for the first time after her crying stopped long time ago. She and Yugao just spent their time cuddling with each other on the bathroom floor since then. Nope. Yugao ni! Anko whined childishly as she looked imploringly up at Yugao's face with her puppy eyes. It might have worked if her eyes weren't puffy and red with dark tear streaks running down her cheeks. That won't work on me. This person specifically asked not to be identified. While I don't agree with that, I have to respect it. If it makes you feel better, the person said you'll know after some time. Just not right now, Yugao explained, but Anko still had an impatient frown on her face. Why bother hiding it from me at this moment then? You should know why, Anko-chan. What? That I said if anyone managed to get this seal off, I was going to perform 100 blowjobs in a row, and then I'd gladly give him my virginity, including my ass, as we fuck like rabbits for an entire month? Anko said all of this with a straight face. It greatly disturbs me that what you just said is very tame compared to the last time you described how you'd thank whoever took the seal off. And what if it was a female? Yugao deadpanned. Strap on. Anko simply said as if it was obvious, making Yugao blush, before she continued. I was under the influence of the curse mark. Right now I'm just being sane and rational about how much I should owe for getting the seal off. And that is precisely why your savior didn't want to be identified. He doesn't want you to feel like you owe him anything. I suppose so, but I don't care. Thank you for telling me it was a he, though. Anko grinned impishly, much to Yugao's annoyance at revealing yet another bit of information by accident. Alright, you leave me no choice, Anko-chan. I'm pulling rank. Anko gasped. You can't, Yugao-ne. I can and I will. I'm forbidding you from finding out more about this guy. It's an S-rank secret only Jounin and ANBU know anyway. No, I mean you really can't. You're an ANBU and I'm still a regular nin. Technically, you don't exist in the shinobi force, so you can't really command me except when the old man says so. Unless you get reinstated. Anko teased with a smirk. Damn it. When did you get smart? Yugao sighed. In any case, some parts of this incident are still part of an S-rank secret. Even if I don't command you, you're still not allowed to know who he is on orders of Hokage-sama, Chunin Mitarashi Anko. Yugao tried to be firm but wasn't able to pull it off as she still showed amusement at her little sister's stubbornness about this. Anko wasn't fazed by her threat. It doesn't matter whatever you say. I'm going to find out, and if I have to ride your ass about this every day until you break, I will do it. Anko challenged. Yugao smirked. Try it. For now, I think I'll have a little fun, she suddenly exclaimed as she began tickling Anko, who was still cuddling against her and wasn't prepared for the sudden attack. Anko shrieked in laughter as the two women wrestled around playfully on the bathroom floor. A week and a half later, 4 days before Naruto leaves for his third trip. Hokage-sama, you have to do something about Anko-chan. Yugao's tired voice echoed across the Hokage's office as she entered through the door in full ANBU outfit. The Hokage raised an eyebrow as he looked up from the paperwork he was doing. If he could see underneath the mask, he would have seen bags under her eyes and a sickly hue to her pale skin. Whatever did Anko-chan do, Nico-san? The third said almost amusedly, having a good idea of what was going on. I'm about to break. She's been constantly hounding me ever since that day. She kept finding ways to try to make me slip up and wouldn't let me get enough sleep. I don't think I can take it anymore at this rate. Either I tell her now or I break down and stab her repeatedly. Yugao's voice cracked on the last sentence, as if to show she was barely hanging by a thread. I see. So that's how she found out I also know about her savior's identity a few days ago. The Hokage exclaimed lazily as if he uncovered an obvious clue. Yugao flinched before bowing deeply. I'm sorry, Hokage-sama. She just is very good at drawing out bits of information one at a time. I don't blame you. Ibiki-san has been telling me Anko-chan is the most promising interrogator to come out of the TNI department in a long while. Yugao chuckled nervously. How do you know she knew? She hasn't threatened you into revealing it to her or anything, has she? She looked ready to apologize deeply for whatever her little sister may have done. Oh, nothing that drastic. I don't know what she has been doing with you, but she has been hinting to me that as long as I withhold the information from her, she would go insane with frustration. Hiruzen paused briefly before continuing. Quite frankly, she has a creative mind. I almost think she was going crazy slowly for real. Hokage-sama, what did she do? Yugao asked with trepidation in her voice. For one thing, she has been completing her missions in odd ways. Like the delivery mission the other day in which she forced her client to dance a jig, while screaming unintelligibly before she would give him the package. Yesterday, she passed out several copies of Jiraiya-kun's books to the children of the village she was guarding from some bandits, saying they were great books for children. Needless to say, I received a strongly worded letter from the client this morning. Oh no, Anko-chan. Yugao groaned as she slapped both her hands to her forehead in shame for her little sister. In addition to that, she's been spending a lot of her free time at that window. Hokage pointed to one of the windows on the right wall of his office. Yugao was confused as she carefully glanced over at the indicated window, before she stiffened in shock. On the window were clearly identifiable face and handprints that could only belong to one Mitarashi Enko. She would spend the time pressing her face and hands against the window as if she was looking through a window into a Toy Story and just stare at me. Even when the ANBU shooed her off, she would come back not long after. The Hokage finished as he suppressed a small shiver. He had seen many horrors in his long life, but seeing Enko's face staring at him soullessly through the window all day certainly was in the top 5. Yugao stood still as she contemplated the extent Enko was going to go to find out this information about Naruto. I say we forget our promise to Naruto-san. She spoke immediately with no regret in her voice for the blonde. Agreed. Which is why I just sent Enko-chan out on an A-ranked interrogation mission with Ibiki-san today. She should be back in 3 days. The third smirked as leaned back in his chair. Yugao was about to ask what that had to do with giving Naruto up to Enko when she realized something. The Hokage could feel her smirk evilly underneath her mask. Getting one over Naruto-san and the stupid council at the same time. That's going to be a great day. May I have the office guard duty that day to see this? The Hokage nodded with a smile. Day before Naruto leaves for his training, Mitarashi Enko entered the Hokage's office with a slight spring to her step. The Hokage saw that she seemed to be in a really good mood, as if she had the best day ever. Welcome back, Enko-chan. I see that your mission went well, he observed as he leaned back in his chair. Yup. Turns out one of the targets looked very similar to one of the bastards that attacked me 2 weeks ago. Ibiki-san let me have him to myself while he took care of the others. Enko's innocent-looking smile grew even wider at that, if that was possible. The Hokage shivered and made a note to himself not to piss this woman off. I see. Did you get the information we needed? Of course, old man. He gave everything up since his birth until Ibiki-san told me to tone it down. Another cold shiver went down the old man's spine. For even making the hardened interrogator tell someone to tone it down had to mean Ibiki had seen horrors he would never forget at the hands of this young woman. Anyway, I'm going to go home and bug Yugao some more, so here's the mission rep dash. Enko was interrupted when the Hokage held his hand out for silence. She was in the process of taking the stamped mission scroll out of a pocket on her flak vest when she was stopped. She put on a cute confused pout as she cocked her head to the side, her fan ponytail swaying with the movement. Hold off on officially completing the mission. Let me get someone here, so please wait a moment, Enko-chan. The Hokage snapped his fingers for an ANBU to appear. Get me Naruto-kun. 10 minutes later Naruto appeared, pushing the office door open loudly. What's up, Ho-dash? Whatever the blonde was going to say died in his throat as he noticed Enko standing in front of the Hokage's desk. She was looking at him quizzically. He was about to run back out of the office when the door closed behind him. Jolting in surprise at the sound of the door closing, he glanced behind to see a certain purple-haired ANBU with a hand on the doorknob. He narrowed his eyes at her as he practically felt the vicious smirk underneath her cap mask. He knew right away what this meeting was about, but he couldn't escape if Yugao and the Hokage was going to keep him here. Sighing in defeat, he walked up to stand next to the still confused Enko. Alright, let's get this over with, you backstabbing old bastard. Naruto grumbled as he crossed his arms over his chest. Enko whipped her head toward the blonde with wide-eyed surprise. Even she thought she was getting away with it a little when she was calling the powerful leader of Konoha old man. Ah, Naruto-kun, your cruel words cut me deep. The Hokage retorted with mock hurt on his face. Shall I throw him in a cell? The cap-masked Yugao teased from behind. Enko was looking all over the place in growing confusion. Just what the hell is going on? She demanded. Hiruzen chuckled for a moment before schooling his face in a neutral expression. First, we'll begin with this, Enko-chan. You have shown outstanding abilities as a kunoichi in most areas, especially in interrogation, taijutsu, weapons, and assassination. In addition, you have been getting much stronger over the past 2 weeks. Truth be told, if it was only up to me, you would have been a jounin long ago. The Hokage smiled as Enko slightly blushed at the praise she was getting. She knew she was getting stronger now thanks to the seal being removed. It wasn't holding her back anymore, and she allowed herself to go all out without worrying about any backlash from the mark. While she was a long way from fully matching up to an elite like Kakashi and Guy, she would be able to at least give them a run for their money for a while before they overpowered her. However, unfortunately for you, the jounin judges and the council would not bring themselves to overlook your past and simply evaluate your current skills as they should. The third noticed Enko stiffen at the mention of her past, and she was looking nervously over at Naruto, who was watching the whole process with a neutral expression. Enko-chan doesn't care if the entire village knew her past, but she was worried about this one young boy knowing it. I wonder why. Which is why I'm thankful that there is an obscure old law from the Second Great War that hadn't been repealed by the daimyo court yet. Granted, not many know about this, and I intend to keep it that way. It's why I stopped you from officially reporting your mission as complete. The Hokage smiled as Enko's confused expression began to clear away when she seemed to have realized where this conversation was going. Even Naruto, upset as he was, smiled in support for Enko. The third continued. It allows for the Hokage or the Jounin commander to do a field promotion of any Chunin to Jounin in an active B-rank mission or higher with no question if there was a recommendation from the Chunin's commander as well. It just so happens I have a letter here from Marino Ibiki strongly praising your abilities and asking for an immediate promotion to the rank of a full Jounin, and I agree too, he declared as he pulled out a paper with Enko's promotion order on it to sign it. It took a moment for the news to hit Enko as she stared at the Hokage with a neutral expression before her lips slowly formed into a bright smile. Then she began hopping around excitedly. Yes! I did it! Take that, you council cocksuckers! She cheered loudly as she flipped a bird in the general direction of the council chamber. Afterward, she quickly hugged Yugao tightly and then picked the protesting Naruto up and swung him around. Even the blonde had to laugh happily after a few seconds, however. Wait! Enko suddenly stopped mid-celebration as she held Naruto still in the air with one of her legs bent at her knee, demonstrating her amazing balance on just one foot. She seemed to have remembered something. Naruto, meanwhile, was muttering "oh crap" as he struggled to get out of her surprisingly strong grip. Now that I'm Jounin, who the hell did it? Who saved me? Enko looked over at the Hokage with a gaze that would not allow anyone to avoid the issue anymore. Fortunately for her, the third don't intend to drag this out any longer. He simply pointed at Naruto, who was now trying to sneak out one of the office's window. He froze when everyone's attention was on him. For a moment, Enko was stunned that it was this boy who saved her from the men and broke her curse mark. She then blinked in surprise that Naruto managed to get out of her sure grip as she checked her now empty hands still up in the air mid-celebration. Finally, she got annoyed that he would run away from her. She quickly flicked an arm out toward Naruto and several snakes shot out of her shirt sleeve. Sanaijushu, hidden shadow snake hands! She shouted authoritatively as the snakes wrapped themselves around the boy's limbs just when he was jumping out of the window. Naruto gulped, and then yelped as the snakes pulled him back inside. In the next instant, he was being dragged struggling along the floor toward Enko. She then hoisted him up by his collar when he arrived at her feet. So, Gaki, care to tell me why you were running away from sweet Olmi? She sweetly asked with a fake smile plastered across her face now inches from his comically sweating one. Yugao snorted behind her mask. Maybe it's because you sent your snakes after him? She interjected snarkily. Enko glared across at her older sister. It's not my fault my secret admirer is so shy. Now you understand you've freed me from years of pain and misery, and it would have gone on for a long time too. You also saved me from those pig bastards. You have no idea how much I appreciate that, Gaki. She spoke softly as she brought Naruto closer, her light brown eyes boring intensely into his blue ones. Naruto sighed tiredly as he freed himself from her grip to stand in front of her. Just a thank you is fine. I didn't want to see you suffering so much under that awful seal, and I just happened to have a way of removing it when I saved you, so I did it. I'm not looking for anything from you except our continued friendship. He finished with a gentle smile. Enko frowned, and then let out a sigh. I was going to just ignore what you just said and try my best to repay you for far more than that. I probably would have been very adamant about it if this was right after you took the mark off, but that I've had 2 weeks to think over this and calm down a little. I suppose I'll just take you up on your offer to continue keeping in touch in the future. Besides, I can't ignore your request when you smile like that. She smiled back just as gently, before bending down at her hips. She then wrapped her arms tightly around his neck for a crushing and enveloping hug, making the boy blush slightly as he felt her chest on his, even though it was buffered by her padded flak vest. Thank you so much. You saved my honor, and you got that mark off me. Even after all that, you still never asked for anything in return. Thank you? Her voice trembled as she spoke next to the boy's ear. Naruto nodded before wrapping his arms around her to hug her back just as tightly. After a long moment, Enko had a mischievous twinkle in her eyes as she whispered into his ear. However, I might change my mind about your reward when you get a few years older. You're going to be very easy on the eyes, I can tell. I wouldn't mind if my first time is with you, you know. She teased before leaving a ghost of a peck on his neck and releasing the boy to reveal a wide-eyed Naruto with a blush on his cheeks that rivaled the best of Hinata's. Enko chuckled while Yugao and the Hokage wondered what she had said to him. I'm curious as to how you got the seal off me, though. Enko put on a thoughtful expression. I'm afraid that's classified even for a jounin. Only Naruto-kun and I know. The Hokage quickly cut in, making sure to leave Yugao out so Enko would not try anything with her. Yugao and the Hokage then face-faulted when she just shrugged as if she didn't care, since they were expecting her to doggedly go after this information, like she had about her savior's identity. Oh well. Who cares? I don't give a flying fuck because the mark's gone, she declared in a sing-song tone as she skipped in a circle around the room. The other 3 occupants in the office sweat dropped. Naruto then leaned toward the old man to whisper. Hokage Gigi. You sure I didn't do something else to her when I broke the seal? Maybe I damaged her brain or something? I heard that. A few minutes later, after Enko dropped her mission scroll off, she left with Yugao to celebrate her promotion with lots of dango. But not before promising Naruto she would see him again soon to discuss how he rescued her in detail, among other things. The blonde then was asked to stay behind. So what else is there to talk about? He quizzed, and got a shiver down his spine when the third's lips formed into a knowing smile. While I really am happy that you freed Enko-chan from her suffering, I still believe you've been a bit too reckless about removing the cursed seal. Kurama, realizing something was off in the Hokage's office, tried to speak up Naruto, but her host seemed oblivious to the voice in his head at this moment. I don't see anyone else being successful at taking it off her. He crossed his arms and narrowed his eyes defiantly. Be that as it may be, I believe Jiraiya-kun has taught you to approach every seal with delicacy. Naruto, He even tried to relate it to making love to a woman, too. Though I didn't understand what that damn pervert even said at that time. Naruto retorted with a chuckle, still not really hearing the fox's increasingly alarmed voice. Would you think he'd be pleased with how you took care of this situation? The Hokage quizzed with a knowing smirk. Naruto let out a snort. Hell no. He'd kick my ass into next week. But he doesn't have to know that, does he? He nervously said as he hoped the Hokage would drop this. What? Naruto seemed to have finally realized Kurama was speaking to him. There's someone behind you, dumbass. He felt his insides go ice cold as the third glanced up behind the boy. Well, Naruto-kun said that. How do you intend to respond, Jiraiya-kun? He whirled around to see the large white-haired man looming over him. The Toad Sage's presence felt like it was more overpowering than even the Kyuubi's at that moment as he glared hotly down at the shrinking blonde boy. His lips, thin with anger, slowly moved upward into a nasty smile. Well, my little godson has been a naughty little boy while I was gone. I think I will have to teach you a lesson. He rumbled as he continued to stare down at the jinchuriki. Okay, that guy scares the shit out of me right now. I'm going to sign off for a while and hope you survive. Farewell. Why did I just have a feeling of déjà vu right now? Naruto thought offhandedly before he, in an increasingly rare moment of stupidity as of late, decided to stand up to his very powerful godfather. Well, how are you going to do that, Ero-sennin? He challenged with a nervous but brave look. Jiraiya chuckled evilly as he raised a hand, holding something in it. It was a long stick that looked oddly familiar to the blonde. Naruto stepped back in shock when realization struck him. My Nad's Crusher! How'd you get it? He exclaimed tremblingly as he took another step back when Jiraiya raised the stick threateningly. Doesn't matter. Stay and take your punishment like a man, Gaki! The sage shouted before sprinting toward the boy. That'll keep me from becoming a man! Naruto yelled as he jumped over Jiraiya's lunge and dashed for the open window. The blonde thought he got free as he jumped outside when he heard a loud voice. Kuchios, summoning! Jiraiya's voice shouted before a pop was heard. In the next instant, Naruto was stopped midair outside the window as a long and slimy red tongue wrapped itself around his torso and pulled the screaming boy back into the office. In the next moment, the Hokage calmly stepped up to the window to close it to contain what was sure to be a lot of shrill screaming for the next hour in the office. Next morning near the main gate. Fuck you to hell! Naruto cursed out the tall white-haired man next to him for the 20th time that morning as he tried to shake off a limp due to the lingering pain in his groin. Jiraiya merely grinned. I'll get you for this. The blonde vowed darkly just as the two arrived at the main gate. They were surprised to see someone waiting there this early in the morning. Midarashi Anko was standing still with a travel bag at her feet, as if she was awaiting someone to meet her. What stunned the men was her new wardrobe. She was wearing a full-body mesh armor that went down to her thighs with a skin-tight flesh-colored shirt underneath that gave off the illusion she was topless. A burnt-orange miniskirt even skimpier than her old black one barely covered the rest of her modesty. But if she so much as lifted a leg a little too high, a lot of men in close proximity were going to automatically crane their necks with a snap, hoping to see what she was hiding underneath. To finish off the ensemble, she put on a pair of shin guards along with a new pair of open-toed ninja sandals, instead of her old combat boots, and topped the outfit off with a tan knee-length trench coat left open to give an enticing view of her topless upper body. The only things that remained the same was her snake fang necklace, fan ponytail, and her hitayite in its usual place on her forehead, almost hidden by her long bangs. To say her new outfit didn't leave much to imagination would be very accurate, as evidenced by a nosebleed coming out of Jiraiya's nose as he stared openly at the woman. Even Naruto was sporting a blush. Anko finally saw the two men and smiled brightly before moving in front of them. "Hello? Jounin Midarashi Anko reporting for duty as your escort this summer. Now I know why you're so strong for your age, Gaki. You got one of the freakin' Sannin training you," she declared cheerfully before becoming confused by the men's silence. She noticed them staring at her in stunned disbelief. "What's wrong, boys? Oh, you like my new Jounin outfit? I admit it might be too saucy for you, boys." Anko slowly spoke the last four words seductively as she exaggeratedly strutted her body in front of the men. At this point, both men snapped out of their trace and shook their heads at the same time. They then slapped the air as if doing a tsukomi. No. We're wondering what the hell you're doing here." They deadpanned at the same time in perfect harmony, though they were still sporting blushes from seeing Anko like this. This caused her to slump over dejectedly. "The old man didn't tell you. I volunteered myself, and he gave me permission to go with you," she grumbled as she took out a scroll to toss to Jiraiya, who caught it easily in one hand. "She's right. Well, welcome aboard, Anko-san," he greeted after taking a moment to read the scroll and tossed it back. Naruto felt some apprehension at letting this woman come along on the trip, considering the sensitive nature of his training and, as far as he knew, she didn't know anything about his jinchuriki status as of yesterday. On the other hand, he felt like he could trust her with his secret, considering she experienced something similar to his life. The Hokage also apparently trusted her well enough to allow her to tag along on this trip. In addition, she just became a Jounin and she was going to know his secret eventually. What better way to learn that than straight from the source? "Alright, you two. Let's get going. We're taking a detour before we go to the training ground." Jiraiya's deep voice snapped Naruto out of his thought. His expression suddenly became dark at the mention of the new destination. Anko noticed this before she slapped Naruto on his shoulder somewhat hard. "Gaki, what's wrong? You don't look too happy." Her slightly tactless attitude annoyed Jiraiya as he wanted to protect his godson from further pain of having to dwell on this issue any more than needed. He was about to admonish the woman when Naruto put his hand up for reassurance. "It's okay, Ero-sennin. I trust her enough. We're going to where my parents died." Chapter 12, New Friendships and Cinnamon Buns. Flashback to yesterday afternoon in Hokage's office. "You're a real demon, Anko-sennin," Naruto grumbled as he gingerly applied a bag of ice to his groin. He was laying on the couch in the corner of the office, facing up. The object of his current ire, Jiraiya, was sitting next to him in a chair. The Toad Sage chuckled at Naruto's temporary nickname for him. "It was just a light tap. I'm not stupid enough to jeopardize the future of two lost clans. The rest of the time was just me spanking your cute little butt to humiliate you. Just be happy I didn't do it in front of those two purple-haired beauties. A light tap. Any more and it would have been chakra-powered," Naruto shouted with a comically angry expression. "Just remember I regularly get chakra-powered kicks and stomps to my balls every time I'm caught doing my research." Jiraiya finished with a perverted leer on the last word. "You'll get no sympathy from me. None at all, you old pervert," the blonde quickly retorted with a deadpan expression. Jiraiya's right eye twitched at getting no respect from his student as usual. "Anyway, I figure you've learned enough not to be so reckless about this. You're lucky that snake bastard was too arrogant to think his cursed seal was breakable. Otherwise, he would have incorporated a self-destruction seal into the main array to instantly kill Anko-sen the moment it sensed the array dissolving. I'll let this slide due to the fact you're still inexperienced, and it was in the heat of the moment. Just please think more about studying any seal that could affect a human life more closely next time. He lectured with a serious expression. Naruto became sober at the fact that he did actually risk Anko's life with this. He shivered at the thought of her dying in his arms instead of sleeping contentedly, and exhaled a shuddering sigh to expel it from his mind. It was no use dwelling on what didn't happen, but decided he would at least be more careful next time. I understand, Jiraiya-sensei, he murmured quietly as he stared up at the ceiling with a downcast expression. Jiraiya nodded, satisfied that the boy truly understood due to being addressed respectfully just now. Now we need to keep this quiet from that snake traitor. There's nothing he hates more than failures, especially when it's one of his own masterpieces. He'd do anything to eliminate any outside variable, and that includes killing you. Be careful if you ever have to deal with him in the future, he advised, his gaze steady on Naruto's. His godson nodded firmly before he groaned and adjusted the ice bag on his groin. Anyway, where'd Hokage Gigi go? He asked now that he noticed the absence of the third Hokage in the office. Sensei said he remembered something and went somewhere. We're to wait for him. On that cue, the office doors swung open to admit the third Hokage carrying a giant dust-covered scroll into the office. I must be going senile with old age. I can't believe I didn't think of this for 2 weeks until now, he grumbled as he put the scroll down on the floor in the center of the office. Jiraiya's eyes bulged out when he had a close look at the scroll's kanji. Naruto sat up on the couch, watching this scene with curiosity. Sarutobi-sensei! Is he that dash? Jiraiya pointed lamely at the scroll. His sensei nodded with a smirk as he applied his blood to the seal on it. In the next instant, the scroll unfurled itself to show 10 storage arrays for weapons. Naruto stood and limped over to stand by his godfather. Ero-sennin, what's this? You look like you're about to squeal like a fangirl over this. He pointed out Jiraiya's childishly excited expression while the third prepared to unseal the stored items. You fool! This is an honor that only few had. Sensei along with the elders are probably the only ones currently alive who have seen these weapons. I never thought they'd come out of storage in my lifetime. Jiraiya admonished his student. While this was going on, the third slapped his hand on the main seal array connected to all 10 weapon arrays. A large amount of smoke exploded from the scroll with a pop and nearly filled up the office for a moment. He and Jiraiya heard Naruto yelp in discomfort and looked over at the boy when the smoke cleared to see him squinting in pain with his arms up in front of his face as if to defend himself from an invisible force. I can really feel the fox's chakra. Whatever they are, they're practically radiating it. He winced as he forced himself to get used to the overpowering presence in the air. That makes sense. Naruto-kun, what you're looking at are the 10 weapons that were recovered from Hashirama-sensei's famous battle with Uchiha Madara. The first Hokage used them against him and the Kyuubi, the third explained. At this point Naruto recovered enough to take a closer look at the weapons. He noted 9 different swords of varying designs and sizes. One that stood out to him was twice his size with a sinister-looking curved edge. Another standout was a small tanto with a very complex seal array on the hilt that he didn't think he could ever hope to decipher. The 10th weapon was a giant shuriken that he wasn't sure he could lift and throw with any amount of skill. All in all, they were extremely high quality and durable looking. He also noted, with amusement, Jiraiya crouching over one of the weapons with a glazed look in his eyes and drool almost coming out of his mouth. Now that I'm used to the radiation, I can tell they're carrying a lot of the fox's chakra. It's also very potent, like it hadn't degraded at all since the battle. Thanks to the stasis effect while in storage, I guess. Naruto observed. The Hokage nodded with a smile. It's obvious why I brought them out. I'm thinking you might be able to absorb the chakra. I'll interject here that I am not happy seeing those weapons. They hurt like hell when that wood asshole stuck them into me. We fought with those damn things in me for days. Kurama grumbled. I can understand that. We'll make it quick then. I just hope I won't scream like a pussy this time when I absorb the chakra. It feels really potent. No promise I won't tease you afterward, she retorted with a snicker. Ignoring the jab, Naruto brought his right arm up out in front of him and channeled some of Kurama's chakra into it. The shroud now covering it, he concentrated for a second before he could see bits of dark chakra appearing in the air from the direction of the weapons as they whirled around to form a dark and dense chakra ball. Hiruzen and Jiraiya, now done gushing over the weapons, observed the procedure closely. So you did figure out how to begin forming the Rasengan like Sensei said, Gaki? Jiraiya spoke with a thoughtful expression. Yeah, the fox told me when she saw you using it, she was reminded of how her Bijudama was formed. They were similar in principle. From there, we figured out the 3 steps you mentioned. Rotation, power, and then compression, right? The sage nodded, genuinely impressed. I'm still stuck on the first step, though. We haven't figured out how to tell if I did each step right. Naruto explained as he grimaced with effort to contain the still-growing ball of dark chakra. At this point, it was the size of a normal-sized kickball. Since you've learned that much, I'll make it easy for you when I teach you how to do each step correctly this summer. Jiraiya explained as he watched the dark chakra ball eventually stop growing. It was now the size of a large beach ball. The blonde nodded in understanding, then grunted in exertion as he had to support his right hand with his left hand as he expanded the chakra shroud to wrap around the ball. Naruto-kun, are you sure that much won't kill you? The Hokage asked in a worried tone as he realized the size and potency of the chakra ball hovering above Naruto's hand. The fox said I won't die no matter how much pain I go through as my body adapts more to accept more of the yin-infused chakra. I'm okay with that since I want to be the strongest shinobi around and protect my precious people. If a little bit of pain is all I need to move closer to that goal, I'll gladly take it. Naruto answered with a determined tone as the chakra shroud broke the ball into pieces to be absorbed back into his body. The boy turned to Jiraiya. I'll probably be out like a light for the rest of the day after the pain passes, so just drop me off at my apartment whenever you can. Jiraiya nodded grimly as he noticed the boy's body begin to twitch with twinges of pain all over. Before long, the hardened toad sage had to grit his teeth as he watched his godson collapse to the floor trembling and straining to keep from yelling out in pain, his heart going out to this young boy who was prepared to do what it took to get stronger. It was a long and tortuous 30 minutes for the older men in the office until they sighed in relief upon seeing Naruto's body become still as he slipped into unconsciousness. He did not once scream in pain, a testament to this boy's incredible willpower. Sensei, you should know I'm going to take him to the site of the Kyuubi's ceiling when we leave tomorrow. Also, if he's up to it, we'll be stopping by the Valley of the End on the way back from training. Jiraiya advised as he scooped up the unconscious blonde into his arms. The Hokage nodded in understanding. As long as Naruto-kun feels he is ready to visit the place where his parents died in their final stand against the Kyuubi. We'll be in my usual hotel suite if you need us before we leave. Not going to take him to his apartment? After all the crap and pain he went through, I figured he deserves a good night's sleep in a comfortable bed, instead of that lumpy pile he calls his mattress, before we get started on his training for the summer. The Toad Sage explained with a smile as he left the office with a sleeping Naruto in his arms. On the road out of Konoha present time after spending the night sleeping peacefully in the most comfortable bed he laid on in his short life, Naruto woke up to the news that Jiraiya would be taking him to the site of his parents' death. That darkened his mood some to say the least, as evidenced by his quiet demeanor while walking a step behind Jiraiya and Anko on the dirt road. The two escorts glanced at each other awkwardly, wondering what to say to the downcast boy. After a while, it was Anko who slowed down enough to walk next him and broke the uncomfortable silence. Gaki, while I hate to bring this up, I'm wondering why we're going to where your parents died if it bothers you this much. She began with concern clear in her voice. Naruto glanced up at her with a weak smile. She frowned inwardly as she decided she didn't like this side of the blonde and vowed to keep him upbeat as much as she could in the future. Sorry if I'm worrying you. I'll be okay. However, before I tell you more about myself, I'm curious as to why you're here with us. You never said anything about coming along yesterday, and now you're suddenly with us this morning. Naruto inquired of her, who shifted awkwardly about being put on the spot about her reasons. To be honest, I wasn't planning on coming along at all. For one thing, I didn't even know you were leaving until last night. Yugane mentioned your annual summer training trip and that usually a volunteer or two comes along to help train you. That answered a lot of questions on why you're strong for your age if you've been trained by the likes of Guy and Kakashi in the past, along with Jiraiya-sama here. The purple-haired woman explained as she rubbed her neck nervously. Naruto blushed at the praise before inclining his head for further explanation. I was thinking after talking with Yugane yesterday that I'd like to know more about you if we're going to be friends from now on, and I just went back to the old man last night and requested time off for my trip with you too. I know you have a few secrets about yourself that was forbidden by laws because I was a chunin up until yesterday, And I thought it's best if you tell me any of them yourself rather than learn it secondhand from people who might not like you. Naruto glanced up at her with interest as soon as she mentioned his secrets. She smiled warmly at him as she continued. Don't think I haven't noticed some of the glares on you from those idiot villagers at that dango shop last year. It felt really weird having the glares split between us two. You're a big mystery and I'd like to fill in some blanks about you over the summer and learn more about what makes you tick, if you don't mind. Anko explained as she put both arms up behind her head as she walked, pushing her large breasts out as they strained against her tight flesh-colored t-shirt. Naruto had to look straight ahead with his eyes threatening to betray his good intentions as they kept stealing glances at her incredible curves. Jiraiya didn't have the same intention as he displayed a perverted smirk with a small nosebleed. He also brought out a notebook as he seemed to have an idea and began scribbling notes in it, before stopping for a moment when a question came to his mind. I'm surprised Ibiki-san let you go for 3 months if you were just getting started in his department, he inquired. He knew Ibiki was usually hard-headed about giving out long breaks like that, especially if it was last minute. He and Naruto then shivered as they noted a sweet smile form on Anko's face, but they knew there were evil intentions behind it. Let's just say I have some knowledge on him and leave it at that. Back in Konoha, a shiver went down Marino Ibiki's spine as he was laying his head on the top of his desk in his office. He ignored it as he wondered how the hell Anko figured out his darkest secret after just a few months of working in his department. And she was merciless in blackmailing me into giving her that much time off. I'd be so proud of her if this wasn't being done to me. Hoping to soothe his nerves, the big, scary-looking, and hardened man reached into his triple-locked desk drawer to pull out his greatest guilty pleasure, the latest volume of his favorite sappy romance manga. Back with the gang, the three walked in silence as Naruto contemplated Anko's reasons for going with them. Well, I guess that's a good reason for me to tell you more about myself. What do you know about the Kyuubi no Kitsune? He quizzed of his newest friend. Enough to know the fourth Hokage didn't kill it like the history books said. She replied quickly in a bored tone, making Naruto and Jiraiya jerk their heads toward her in surprise. Anko glared at them annoyed. I'm smarter than I look. I know a mere human, even one as powerful as the fourth, couldn't kill a force of nature like the Kyuubi. I was 6 when the attack happened, and its power was so awesome that not even the most powerful jutsu I could think of would put a dent in that demon fox. I like this one. She at least respects my status as the strongest entity in the world. Kurama stated pridefully. Of course you'd like whoever praises you. I wonder what she'd think when I tell her a bit more about your cute moments. Like how you like to pounce and play around in the tall grass I made for you, or that you sleep with your tails wrapped around you in a cute and protective way. That never leaves your mouth if you know what's good for you, Naruto. She growled. Naruto smirked inwardly, satisfied with his teasing of the fox. Do I sleep like that? The fox asked shyly after a moment. If I didn't know you as a sadistic sensei from hell, I'd think you were adorable. He had to hold in his chuckle as he heard the fox scoff. You're a lot smarter than 98% of the village, at least. So what do you think happened to the Kyuubi instead? Naruto quizzed further, not noticing Anko's slight blush as he praised her intelligence. Jiraiya did, and he scribbled some more in his notebook, smirking. It was sealed into something. At least that's what my former sensei said. Though he didn't say what or who. Anko's face flashed with anger as soon as she mentioned her former sensei. The men knew who she was talking about but left it aside for now. All of that's true. Though there's no what, just who. Guess when I was born and how old I am right now. Naruto just smiled as Anko whirled her head toward him in surprise. Her face then changed expressions to one of understanding. After staring at his neutral expression for a long moment, she glanced up at Jiraiya, who grimly nodded his head for confirmation. She then looked straight ahead and walked in silence. The males looked at each other again and shrugged. They walked in absolute silence for the next minute. Finally, Anko took several quick steps ahead of the two men and turned around so she stood in front of Naruto, stopping him in his tracks suddenly. He looked up quizzically at her blank expression. Thank you, was all she said before she turned around and continued her walking. Jiraiya glanced down at Naruto, confused only to see a smile slowly spreading across the blonde's face. What was she thanking you for, Gaki? The Toad Sage inquired as the two males picked up their pace after their female companion. Not sure. Could be anything from supposedly keeping the village safe by containing the monster to trusting her with this information. Why the smile then? It's not often I'm thanked for anything I do. I'll take it. After some time walking, they came up to the tree leaning to the forest where the sealing site was located. From that point onward, they needed to travel via the tree limbs. They decided to sit down for a quick snack break before continuing. "Oi, Gaki!" Anko called out as she bit into an apple in her hand. Said Gaki turned his head in her direction as he chewed on his own fruit. "I forgot for a minute, but you haven't answered why we're going to where your parents died. You just said it was where they passed away, but there's another reason, isn't there?" Naruto and Jiraiya exchanged looks. The Toad Sage shrugged before speaking up. "I'll field that question. Gaki here wouldn't be able to explain how to boil water, let alone this." Naruto shot his godfather a dirty look before grumbling as he bit into his apple. Anko smirked at her companion's antics. "Before we begin, Anko-san, this is top secret. Aside from Sarutobi-sensei, not many Jounin and Anbu know about this. The fact that the Hokage allowed you to come along means he believes you're trustworthy enough to learn anything on the trip. Anyway, we're training Gaki here on how to effectively use the Kyuubi's power. We've been doing this every summer since he started academy. So that's why we have to go far out of the village for this. Just in case something went wrong, right?" Anko concluded with a raised eyebrow. "Correct. However, this year we just made a discovery that the Kyuubi's chakra left over from before she was sealed into Naruto still existed, thanks in large part to you. It has a certain component that would improve Naruto's control of the chakra the more he absorbed it. So we're going to where the Kyuubi was sealed so he can find and absorb any residual chakra left by her that night." Wait. You're saying the fox is a she?" Anko exclaimed in shock. "Yeah, I found it hard to believe at first too. Her deep voice certainly threw me off for a while." Naruto interjected with a foxy grin. "One would sound loud and deep enough at my size." Kurama defended lamely. "So you're in touch with her even now?" Anko quizzed. "Yeah. She teaches me a lot, so we're sort of student and sensei. Thanks to her incredibly sadistic teaching methods, I became like this." "You'd better appreciate that, fool. Without my allegedly sadistic methods you wouldn't be able to do even a fraction of what you can do right now. You'd be struggling with that pathetic Bunshin no Jutsu and have learned nothing else. I know that, but I still reserve the right to complain a little. For example, I could do without the ravine climbing. I still have phantom pain with my old broken bones from that." "That's because you're such a delicate little flower," Kurama retorted with a chuckle. "And that's precisely why I have trouble thinking you're female. You talk more like a male." He shot back with a twitching eyebrow. "So the most powerful entity in the world is female. If I wouldn't feel stupid for screaming girls rule at the top of my lungs, I probably would have done it." Anko spoke up with clear pride in her voice. "I'm liking her more." "Of course you would." Anko's cheerful expression suddenly changed to one of puzzlement as she dwelled on something Jiraiya said. "Jiraiya-sama, what did you mean by thanks to me?" The sage pointed at Naruto. "The reason Gaki here saved your cute little ass just in time 2 weeks ago was because of the Kyuubi's old chakra that snake bastard put in you using that curse mark." Anko's eyes widened in shock as she instinctively brought her hand up to where her mark was. She glanced over at Naruto, who had on a serious expression. "It's true. When that incident made your curse mark act up, I felt a familiar presence in the air. At that point, the fox urged me to go to where you were because she sensed her old chakra within you. It was what we needed to improve my control of her chakra, so we came to see if we could get it. It was by coincidence that I came upon you about to be hurt, so I jumped in. After that, I figured out that you had the chakra inside you and it was hurting you badly, so I made the decision to remove it from your body. With the exception of me, no regular human can stand up to prolonged exposure to the fox's chakra." She stared at him with wide eyes for a long moment. "So it wasn't by chance. You intentionally came to me because I happened to have that chakra in me. I was miles away when I felt the chakra. If it was anything else inside you." He trailed off to let that hang in the air. Anko shuddered slightly as she came to terms with how truly lucky she was that bastard snake decided to try putting the Kyuubi's chakra in her curse mark instead of anything else. The one time she let the curse mark flare up since the first few months after she was brought back to Konoha, it saved her last sliver of innocence. "How did you get it out of me?" Naruto and Jiraiya glanced at each other before shrugging. "I bid you," the blonde simply said. "What?" "That's it," she retorted with skepticism. He decided it was better to just show rather than explain, and brought out a small bit of the fox's chakra. It was enough to make Anko look at him warily as she felt the familiar presence of the demon fox growing in the air. After a moment, Naruto bared his teeth to show elongated fangs along with his other more feral features. Anko had to fight down a blush as she saw how much more ruggedly handsome he became with the blackened lips, thicker whisker marks, wilder hair, slitted but gentle crimson eyes, and claws. She always did have a thing for a man looking animalistic. Demonic chakra is attracted to a strong demonic presence. So all I had to do was to bite down on the curse mark and absorb the chakra. After that, whatever was left of the seal disappeared. Naruto explained in a slightly deeper voice before he let the fox's chakra disappear and return to normal. The woman finally nodded in understanding after a long moment of staring at the jinchuriki. Jiraiya had to keep his smirk from showing. Cover up the whole truth with a bit of it, huh? You still explained some of the procedure while hiding the fact that it was because the curse mark was corrupted and broken that you were able to absorb that chakra instead of the other way. Anko suddenly smirked sensually. So that's why I was topless that night. I guess you needed to take my clothes off. Peace, bye, peace. She teased with half-lidded eyes while slowly breathing out the last few words seductively. Naruto's face lit up bright red while poor Jiraiya rocketed backward from a massive nosebleed. Wait. You weren't topless. You still had that purple lace bra on. So you did see, she exclaimed as she caught him in her trap. Jiraiya rocketed backward again from another nosebleed just when he was getting up off the ground. Are you sure you and Yugao-san aren't really sisters by blood? Naruto muttered with an annoyed tone at being tricked so easily again. Anko giggled cutely. Sometimes I wonder that myself. Anyway, I suppose I'll let you off for seeing me like that. Maybe make it part of your reward for freeing me from that mark, she said thoughtfully as she fought down a blush for being seen in her sexiest bra by her savior. No. The blonde immediately rebutted. Excuse me? I don't want that as a reward. It's not that you weren't attractive. I mean, what I saw was amazing, but if you felt bothered about what I did, you're welcome to put me in my place, Naruto declared with a determined expression, though one could see a bead of sweat going down the side of his face. Anko had to keep an appreciative smile from showing at his innocent compliment of her beauty. You're surprisingly honorable for a 12-year-old. Alright, Gaki, I suppose I'll just nick you this time for your good attitude. You also get a 5-second head start, she said with a sickeningly sweet smile as she flicked her right wrist before catching a hidden kunai flying out of her trench coat's sleeve. Naruto just smiled nervously for a second, before he instantly got to his feet and leapt into the trees. Anko silently counted down from 5 before rushing into the forest after her prey. A few seconds later there were sounds of yelling and metals clashing. Left alone, Jiraiya got up again, wobbling from losing so much blood. He wasn't dazed enough to be unable to scribble more in his notebook with a lecherous grin plastered across his face. An hour later at the ceiling site. This is it. We're close, Jiraiya announced as he jumped down to the ground from the trees. Anko and Naruto immediately followed suit. The Toad Sage could see his godson's nervous expression. Gaki, we don't have to do this if you're not ready. There's no pressure. He tried to offer a way out. Anko glanced over at the blonde with concern, wondering what he would do. For a long moment, Naruto stared down at the ground in front of him before perking his head up, determination clear on his face. No. Let's keep going. If I don't do this now, I'm not sure if I'd come back later, he declared. Jiraiya and Anko nodded before they all began their brief walk. I'll put you at ease before we arrive, Gaki. After what happened, we cleaned up the scene. You're not going to see anything unnecessary. We properly buried the bodies and cleared the scene of any blood. Not just out of respect, but we also could not risk any other shinobi finding this site and take DNA samples for their own purposes, Jiraiya stated as he made his way through the thick forest, his two companions close on his heels. He glanced at his godson to see the boy nod in understanding and relief. After a few minutes, the trio came out of the thick forest into a large clearing. Anko and Naruto were surprised to see what looked like a giant light blue barrier dome dwarfing over the trio, covering most of the clearing in front of them. Jiraiya stepped up to the edge of the barrier and put a hand up to touch it. I put this barrier up after we cleared out the scene. We could feel the area inside was practically saturated with the presence of the fox, and Sarutobi-sensei ordered me to put up an impenetrable security barrier. It was to protect this area and put it in stasis so we could study the effects of the chakra if we were able to. Gaki, the chakra you're about to absorb is going to be nearly as potent as it was on that night. Anko-san, this might explain why some of the fox's chakra ended up in you because the few expeditions we sent here included Orochimaru each time. However, we weren't aware that he somehow managed to collect the chakra, if he did anything these times. Jiraiya explained as he rubbed his hand across the surface of the barrier slowly. Naruto noticed Anko glancing over at him worriedly when the snake trader was mentioned. He made a mental note to settle her worries about that soon. Here we go, kiddies! Jiraiya announced as he blurred through hand seals before slamming a palm on the barrier. In the next instant, the shimmering blue wall disappeared, revealing a large barren clearing that had clear signs of the Kyuubi having been here. After a long moment of standing at the edge, Naruto pushed himself to step inside the barrier's boundary with Jiraiya next to him. Anko felt it wasn't her place yet, so she decided to remain silent and walked a few steps behind the two males. Naruto saw giant gouges and depressions all over the ground as if a giant creature had been here. There were a couple of giant handprints, and they were twice Kurama's current size, proving the theory that his father split the demon fox in two during the sealing. He also noticed a large pile of rubble at the edge of the clearing. Jiraiya, seeing the blonde's interest in the rubble, decided to clarify. That used to be a private cottage for whenever your parents wanted to get away from the hustle and bustle of Konoha for a while. From what Sarutobi-sensei told me, Minato teleported the fox over here when she was about to damage the village with one of her Bijudama. He was able to do that because of a Hiraishin marker he kept here. The sealing happened immediately afterward. Naruto nodded, thankful for the explanation. He wanted to learn more about what exactly happened that night. Something small next to a large grouping of ground damages caught his eyes and he walked slowly over to it. When he arrived, his eyes widened upon recognizing the object. Jiraiya and Anko both shifted in discomfort at seeing the object Naruto was walking to. This was my ceremonial cradle, wasn't it? The boy murmured quietly as he stood over a small stone cradle barely big enough to hold a newborn. He didn't need to see Jiraiya nod for confirmation. His eyes quickly scanned the ground around the cradle for any sign that his parents might have been nearby in their deaths. Even for any trace of blood. He felt relieved when he saw two pairs of distinctive footprints near the cradle, and his heart sank a little when he saw they were down on their knees. At least they were near me when they died. I wonder what they had to say. He quietly said to no one in particular as Jiraiya and Anko silently put a comforting hand each on his shoulders. I witnessed their final moments just before I was sealed into you. They had a lot to say to you. Kurama, silent for the past hour, finally spoke up with clear hesitation in her voice as she dreaded the response from Naruto that came. Can you show it to me? I need to see it. Her host inquired with determination. He could tell Kurama did not want to share her memory of that event for his sake, but he needed to see this. Naruto, you should know that I was released from that masked bastard's control in the last few minutes, and I was desperately trying to keep my brief freedom. I was fully aware and in control of my actions at that point. I was also very angry when your parents managed to ensnare me and were preparing to seal me into you. I tried to kill you to prevent that, and they got in the way of my strike. Even though they were already dying and I merely quickened the process, it's not a scene a child should see of his parents. Kurama admitted nervously as she felt her container stiffen when she mentioned his parents taking her attack meant for him. Naruto took a deep breath to steady himself before continuing. I'll see you in a second, he stated firmly as he heard Kurama sigh dejectedly. He turned to his companions. Thanks for your support. However, can you give me a few minutes to mediate? The fox said she has memories of that night, and I'm going to ask her to show me. I want to hear what my parents had to say, he requested solemnly of his companions. Jiraiya flinched as Anko looked on worriedly. Gaki, are you sure? I've seen the results. They did not die peacefully at all. I know. The fox said as much, but I'm prepared. I just want to be left alone for a few minutes, Naruto declared as he turned around, not leaving any room for debate as he sat down on the ground in his lotus pose a few meters away. Jiraiya and Anko watched with trepidation. In the mindscape, Naruto appeared standing in the middle of the plain portion of his mindscape in front of Kurama. He grimly looked up at the giant fox's sad expression. No words were needed as she brought up a holographic projection of her memories out of thin air. Naruto, I'm sorry for what I'm about to show you, she simply said, her voice filled with sorrow. A few minutes later outside in the clearing, Jiraiya and Anko stood a few meters away from the mediating Naruto as they watched silently, nervously awaiting any sign of activity from the boy. Anko decided to bring up something that was nagging at her inside. His father's the fourth Hokage. Am I right? She asked for confirmation. She was surprised to see Jiraiya nod with no hint of shock from him at that information being found out. You look like you were expecting me to find this out, even though I'm sure it was a big secret if the rest of the village had no idea. I'd be disappointed in your intelligence if you didn't figure that out by yourself with all the obvious clues around here. The fact Sarutobi-sensei let you come along on this trip is a sign that he trusts you to keep whatever information you find to yourself, so I see no reason to hide anything from you. Jiraiya retorted gruffly. Well, aside from the Gaki being basically a mini-fourth, I'm pretty good with tracking and doing investigations. I could easily tell from looking around this area that it was just the fourth, since he obviously had to be here to do the sealing, and a woman, most likely the mother, with baby Gaki until the others arrived after the fact. Since you guys kept mentioning that his parents died here and I don't see any sign of another couple, it's impossible to dismiss the fourth as the Gaki's father. Enko recounted her observations from walking around the clearing. Jiraiya smiled. I would be a bit more impressed if you figured out the mother yourself. Uzumaki Kushina, she quickly replied with a victorious smile. The sage glanced over at the young woman with a raised eyebrow, hoping for further explanation. I ran into her a few times around the village when I was a child before the Kyuubi attack. She was a beautiful and kind woman. Someone like her was impossible to forget, especially with that long red hair. I saw her with the fourth one time and I remember thinking it was so obvious they had the hots for each other. Being around 5 at that time, I was hoping I didn't catch their cooties. Enko chuckled as she relived the memory of Kushina's bright and mischievous smile, very similar to Naruto's. Jiraiya nodded with a gentle smile, lost in his own memories of the couple that were like his own offsprings. Tell that to the Gaki when you can. He'll want to hear more about his parents from anyone that met them. Enko nodded as she went back to watching Naruto meditate in silence for a moment. Jiraiya glanced over at her, and he could tell from her expression that she was starting to care for the blonde. He wondered if any romance would develop in the future, especially with the Hyuga heiress around him. In any case, he thought he should at least encourage this purple-haired woman to deepen her bond with his godson. Enko-san, you should talk to him about your own past soon. It's clear you're afraid of him finding it out eventually. He stated bluntly as Enko jerked her head to him with wide eyes before she sighed. It's that obvious, huh? I know I should let him know, especially since he shared his secrets with me, but I'm afraid of what he'd think. It would be pretty hypocritical of the Gaki if he thought badly of you for that. What do you mean by that? He's had to live with the village's hatred directed at him since the day he was born. Even now, most of the villagers still hate him for what he represented, even though he never made the choice to carry that stigma. Sound familiar? Enko winced at being reminded of her own situation. That's what I thought. I think he knows already and is just waiting for you to feel comfortable enough to share your story with him. I guarantee you it'll make you feel better to talk it over with someone who can understand where you're coming from. At least just think about it. The Toad Sage urged. Enko could only respond with a silent nod of understanding before they returned their gazes to Naruto's still form. After a few long minutes, they perked up upon hearing him let out a loud exhale. Any hope of seeing Naruto at least come out of his mindscape okay was shattered when they saw a look of deep pain and suffering creep up on his face. The boy was straining to not cry as he looked up to the clear sky and took heavy, long, and trembling breaths. He moved a hand to clench on tightly to his orange jacket's fabric right over his heart, as if to try to contain the pain flowing from there. Naruto! Enko called out softly, dropping her usual nickname for him for the moment. She tried to step closer to the suffering blonde before she was stopped in her track by him raising his other hand in a halting gesture. Naruto let out one last loud exhale before shakily getting up to his feet. Enko-san, Jiraiya-sensei, please step back. I'm going to absorb the sea chakra now. My emotions are kinda wild, so I'm not sure what's going to happen when I bring out the shroud for this, he shakily said as he looked over at his two companions with dull blue eyes, pain evident in them. He then slowly turned and walked away toward the center of where Kurama had been restrained for her sealing. Shocked at the sudden action, Enko stood still for a moment before she felt her body move forward toward the suffering boy. Naruto, you don't have to do this. Just take it easy for now. Her voice rose in alarm as she felt the desperate need to try to comfort him. That was before she felt the powerful Toad Sage's hand gripping her shoulder, keeping her in place easily. She jerked her head back toward him with a deadly glare and snarled at him angrily, not caring she was trying to threaten one of the most powerful shinobi in the nations. Her actions didn't faze him one bit as he pulled the struggling woman backward. Let me go, asshole! Can't you see he's hurting? Enko yelled at the tall white-haired man as she tried to take several swipes at him, all of which he easily blocked. I know, and there's nothing I want more than making sure he's okay, but he's unstable right now. I can feel him barely holding the fox's chakra in for our safety. The best thing we can do for now is to just allow him to let it out for the next few minutes, then you can move in, he warned solemnly as he pulled her back to the edge of the clearing, at least 100 meters away from the lone blonde. How much damage could he cause with that chakra? Enko shouted disbelievingly. As if to answer her question, the duo were blown back a few feet when Naruto threw his head back to the sky to let out a loud and pain-filled roar as red chakra exploded out of him violently in all directions. As the chakra expanded, a huge crater formed underneath, and it got deeper with him at the center the bigger it got. Jiraiya and Enko had to put their arms up to protect against flying debris and strong gusts before the crater and chakra finally stopped expanding at around 50 meters from the boy. The chakra then compressed itself quickly around the boy to form into his three-tailed chakra shroud. Naruto's feral features seemed subdued as he stared blankly at nothing in particular in front of him, while he brought his right arm straight up above his head, the hand outstretched. Jiraiya and Enko could feel the atmosphere shift and vibrate around their skin as they watched in amazement a large and dark chakra ball slowly forming in midair directly above Naruto. Enko glanced over at Jiraiya for any clue on what to do now, and was unnerved to see him looking so pale. What's wrong? Hasn't he done this before? Yeah, but the last time I saw him do this, that ball was the size of a beach ball. He absorbed that into himself and he suffered 30 minutes of agony that I can only imagine. Look at the size of that thing, and it's still growing. Enko shifted her attention back to Naruto and gaped as she saw the ball was at least 5 times the size of what Jiraiya saw the night before, and it was still slowly expanding. We have to stop him. Won't that kill him? She pleaded as she wanted to go out to the boy, still struggling with Jiraiya's vice-like grip on her shoulder. It's too late. There's no telling what'll happen if he just let it destabilize instead of absorbing it. The QB said it won't kill him no matter how much it hurts, but... He trailed off, worry clear on his face. After a long excruciating moment of silently watching Naruto continue to form the ball, it seemed to have finally stopped expanding and the entire clearing fell deathly silent. Enko's heart clenched tightly as she saw tears flowing freely down Naruto's cheeks, a sharp contrast to the boy's aggressively feral features. The two watched in abject horror as Naruto expanded his chakra shroud to wrap around the ball and break it into pieces. He then began absorbing the shroud, now mostly dark red with the new chakra in it, into his own body. As soon as the last bit was absorbed, the terrible presence lifted, leaving the clearing quiet and still once again, the only difference from before being the new large crater that formed. Jiraiya's hand lifted off Enko's shoulder at that point, and that was all the prompting she needed. She dashed at full speed down the crater toward Naruto, reaching him in seconds as his hands started to tremble. She half-tackled him into a tight hug as she felt his body start to rack with jolts of pain. She felt him slowly wrap his arms around her underneath her arms and grasped painfully at her shoulder blades, but she didn't mind. They sank to their knees as Naruto's body gave out, and she gently pulled his head into the nape of her neck so she could whisper next to his ear. It's okay, Naruto. I'm here. Just let it all out. No need to hold it in. She spoke soothingly, and could feel Naruto nod his head slightly as he started to sniffle and sob while trying to hold in groans of pain but failing. After a few minutes of this, Enko felt Jiraiya step up close to the two of them. She glanced up at him as he let out a weary sigh. Damn, I hate seeing him like that. He should be happy and cheerful, not this. I don't know how long this will go on, so I'm just going to go ahead and set up camp for us for the night. I'll get you when I make something to eat, he stated, his sad eyes lingering on the crying blonde. Enko only nodded silently as she tightened her hold around Naruto's trembling form. Some time later Naruto popped his eyes open to see the night sky dotted with stars everywhere above him. After quickly gaining his bearings, he let out a sigh as he didn't seem to be permanently hurt from that absorption process. That was totally reckless of him. Enko then came into his view upside down, a relieved expression on her face upon seeing him finally awake. A nearby campfire cast a warm glow over her. Enko-san? He croaked a little as his throat was dry. What are you doing up there? And why are you upside down? Enko giggled uncharacteristically at his silly questions. You've been sleeping on my lap, silly. Where else would I be? Naruto widened his eyes as he reflexively tried to sit up only to be kept in place by a hand to his forehead. He noticed he was lying on the ground with Anko sitting behind his head, cradling it in her lap. Don't move, Gaki. You're staying right here until I say otherwise. Plus, I like running my hands through your hair. Anko teased as she slowly raked her fingers through his beautiful and soft sun-kissed blonde hair. Naruto blushed but let out a contented sigh as he relaxed under her ministration. He certainly appreciated the feeling of her soft and warm thighs on the back of his head and neck as well. How long have I been out? He simply asked. 7 hours. You spent the first 2 hours crying like a baby, then you slept the rest. Anko teased as Naruto groaned. The fox gives me hell about that. I don't need that from you too, he retorted with a smirk. Anko's expression changed to one of wariness. Are you okay with her? The fox, I mean. She saw Naruto's inquisitive expression, so she continued. Jiraiya-sama told me what might have happened that night, about how your parents protected you from a fatal strike from the Kyuubi. She almost panicked as she watched the blonde's beautiful blue eyes dull slightly in remembrance before she calmed down when he smiled slightly. Yeah. They did take a fatal strike meant for me. I'd admit seeing them get skewered by a giant claw was gut-wrenching, but I'm glad I did when I got to hear their final words afterward. Because of that, I'm not going to hold it against the fox. It's probably best I stay out of the mindscape for a little while though. We'll just start over in a few days and go from there. Anko smiled, nodding her head. They said they loved you, didn't they? She softly said as she made another pass through the boy's hair with her fingers. His blue eyes widened. They said a lot more than that, but yeah, that's the gist of it, he replied with a bright smile. How did you know? I'm an orphan too. My parents died in the Third Great War when I was an infant. Anko replied in fond remembrance. Naruto's eyes briefly changed to sadness for a moment. I'm sorry. Why are you apologizing, Gaki? That's the greatest wish of many orphans, I suppose. Other people tell me that my parents did love me, and they would have given me a happy childhood if they hadn't died. But like other orphans, I always wanted to hear I love you straight from their mouths. I kind of feel bad I got my answer while you didn't. Don't worry about it. I'm happy for you, Gaki. Besides, I didn't really have much time to dwell on that question when I was taken in as an apprentice to Orochimaru when I was 4. Anko winced at mentioning her former sensei's name only to see Naruto's expression remain neutral, waiting for her to continue. She felt some relief at that and gained some more courage. He was a tough sensei and never gave me any time to relax and think in my training with him. However, I thought he was a great man and even began to see him as a new father figure in my life. I even thought I would do anything for him. She let out a fond sigh before continuing in a slightly angry tone, her fingers instinctively tightening around Naruto's hair. That's why it hurt so much when he betrayed the village and me. I left the village with that snake trader when I was 9 thinking it was a training trip. I went to sleep in a camp on the side of the road one night, and I woke up 3 years later strapped naked to a lab table with Yugane freeing me from the restraints. I have absolutely no memory of the 3 years I was gone, and no way to recover the time lost. So imagine my shock when Yugane told me that bastard betrayed the village the night he took me with him, and that I was used as an experiment for the curse mark in the end and left for dead in that lab. She growled out the last few sentences as Naruto reached up to take her hand from his hair to let her grip his hand tightly for comfort. She took several calming breaths before continuing. So I came back to the village and was deemed a traitor just because of my ex-sensei. It took a lot of effort for the old man to get me back into the shinobi force, and I'm forever grateful to him for that. Even then, I went through hell with my old genin team making every effort to make me look bad and undermine me at every turn. I was lucky I barely made Chunin with that. Even now as a jounin, I still deal with a lot of hatred from the idiot villagers like you do. I'm just happy I had Yugane and Kurenai-chan around to help me through the tough times up until now. Naruto nodded in understanding as he smiled up at Anko from her lap. You can add me to that list if you'd like. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. I know you didn't deserve any of that because you're a good person. Anko was more happy than she expected to be upon hearing that this particular person accepted her with all the flaws she had. Though she was curious about one thing. How would you know I'm a good person? I certainly don't act like one often. Your older sister. She broke into my home and tried to slice me into pieces when she thought I did weird stuff to you the night I took the curse mark off. While it was a misunderstanding, she declared she would do what it took to protect you from any more harm, and I knew right away she loved you a lot. Naruto chuckled as he watched Anko's face turn bright red from embarrassment. She did what? She didn't tell me that part. That's going too far, even for her. She muttered angrily as she contemplated retaliation for her dear sister. Naruto shrugged. Don't worry. I taught her a lesson. Besides, it was nice seeing her doing so much for you because she thinks of you as a great person. Enko let her embarrassment fade away as she looked down at Naruto, her hand back to raking through his hair absent-mindedly. She stared down into his blue eyes long enough to make him shift slightly under the gaze. Finally, she broke the silence. You're a strange one, Naruto. You're 12 yet you act older and more mature than I am sometimes. Naruto just shrugged, and they exchanged small smiles. At that point, they decided nothing else was needed to be said, so they spent some time enjoying the stars above them. Some distance away in hiding, Jiraiya smiled as he struck some lines through the recent notes he scribbled in his notebook. He decided the scene he just saw belonged to only the two of them. Hey, even he had some standards. Later at the secret training ground. We're here, kiddies, Jiraiya announced as he put his travel bag on the ground next to the small wooden shack at the edge of a large training ground, with Enko and Naruto following suit a second later. So what are we going to teach the Gaki this summer? The lone female inquired as she stretched out her body from the long travel here. He's proficient enough with ninjutsu and taijutsu at this point. As for kenjutsu, there's not much we can do with that until he gets the weapons he needs, so we'll leave that up to training in his mindscape with the fox. I'm going to teach him how to do the Rasengan. Afterward, we'll figure out a few more of my personal jutsu for him to learn. What about stealth, evasion, assassination, interrogation, and tracking? Enko inquired as Naruto watched the conversation with an annoyed tick on his forehead. He was being talked about as if he wasn't there. Jiraiya nodded knowingly. I guess that's why Sensei let you come with us. You'd make the perfect sensei for that. Enko smirked evilly as she turned toward the blonde suddenly, making him flinch and put up a wary defensive pose. I'm getting a bad feeling about this. A certain fox spoke up suddenly. Naruto and Kurama already got past the incident recently and their relationship was back to normal. The blonde could only nod mentally as he had the same feeling too. Let's get started on dodging thrown weapons. I'm going to give you a 10-second head start starting now. What do you mean, Enko-san? That's Enko-sensei to you, Gaki? And it's been 7 seconds. She barked as she took out multiple kunai and shuriken in her hands from somewhere in her trench coat. Naruto knew better than to argue further and ran at top speed into cover in the trees as the crazy woman cackled evilly before she leapt into the forest after the poor boy. While Jiraiya listened to the shrill screams of a young teen in the forest, he briefly wondered if he did the right thing by bringing Enko along on this trip, a few days later. Why the hell am I tied up? Naruto shouted as he struggled to get out the rope binding him tightly. Enko crouched down in front of him with a sweet smile. In case you're captured, you need to learn how to escape by yourself using nothing but your wits. That's the basic rope tying technique most shinobi knows, so we'll begin with that. In the meantime, you're not going to be able to cover up your ears as I teach you about the worst torture techniques we know of. With that information, you should be prepared for whatever your captors might try to get information out of you, she stated with a smirk, remembering getting the same lesson from Ibiki that made her feel green for days afterward. She was surprised to see the blonde just raise an eyebrow. You don't seem worried, Gaki, she observed blandly. I'm not. I probably have heard worse, he replied dully. Her eyebrow twitched at hearing his nonchalant tone. False bravado will get you nowhere, she growled as she proceeded to spend the next 15 minutes telling the captured blonde of the worst torture methods she knew of. That was why it left her stunned as she stared down at the still tied-up boy meeting her gaze with a bored expression, not showing any sign of disgust. How? I made some of the prisoners in my department give up everything they knew just from describing one of these methods to them. You forget who I have in me. She has seen everything humans could do in her thousands of years existing, and she was only too happy to pass on some of her favorite methods. Hearing these made me lose sleep for months, and she refuses to tell me the absolute worst method for worry of shattering my mind just from hearing the description. I'd say the method she was talking about would place in the 30s on my list of the worst I've seen. Kurama interjected helpfully. Enko felt a cold shiver go down her spine as Naruto smirked evilly. Let's see how you like number 15 on her list. A few minutes later, Jiraiya heard dry heaving coming from where Enko was going to teach Naruto about torture. He wouldn't have paid that any mind if he hadn't heard that coming from a female. Curious, He walked over to them to find Anko on all fours, breathing heavy and trembling violently, with Naruto a few feet away beginning to get out of the rope binding him. "What's wrong, kiddies?" His godson shrugged off the rope and stood up, smiling innocently at him. "Anko-sensei here tried to scare me with torture stories. I returned the favor with some of what the fox told me. I'll never be able to get that out of my head. How could humans do that to each other? I'm not even sure I hate Orochimaru enough to try that on him." Anko murmured fearfully as she shivered involuntarily. "Really? It couldn't be that bad, right?" Jiraiya said with a raised eyebrow. Let it be known that was the last time he would ever utter that phrase, as his godson proceeded to repeat the same thing he said to Anko a few minutes ago. A few minutes later, Naruto was now walking away from his two green and heaving companions with a pleased smirk. A few weeks later, letting out a loud yawn as he stepped out of the shack early in the morning, Naruto decided to take a dip in the nearby hot spring. He failed to notice one other empty sleeping cot. A few minutes later, he found himself frozen solid at the edge of the hot spring as his eyes locked on to the naked and curvaceous form of one Mitarashi Anko stepping out of the spring on the other side. Her back was to him as she sighed contentedly, holding a towel to her front, covering up her shapely breasts and her most private spot. She hadn't noticed Naruto yet. From where he was standing, he clearly saw her well-toned legs, her beautiful and round rear end that had to be crafted by Kami, her perfectly proportioned hips, and her small and smooth back. However, what he focused on most was her gorgeous silky purple hair, now out of its usual fan ponytail, cascading down past her shoulders like a waterfall. It had a radiant sheen to it in the growing morning sunlight, especially when she flipped it lightly to shake off some excess water. At this very moment, he felt some stirring in his lions. Puberty has come for our favorite blonde. Kurama laughed as she watched this amusing scene. As if she felt a presence, Anko suddenly snapped her head around and was surprised to see Naruto standing there frozen in shock. After blinking for a moment, she felt her righteous feminine rage growing and was about to visit unspeakable horrors on him, when something unexpected occurred. "Beautiful hair," the red-cheeked boy muttered in a daze. Anko was shocked by that statement, and blushed bright red. That was what he noticed the most. Even though he clearly saw her other features, ones she thought were more attractive to other men? Composing herself, she let out a loud exhale, which snapped the blonde out of his daze. Regaining his senses, he gazed into her annoyed eyes with growing dread. "You've got 10 seconds to burn this amazing view into your brain before I get dressed and try my best to kill you for the day. If you survive, the memory's your reward." She spoke with a bloodthirsty smirk. Naruto gulped but seemed about ready to consider staying, before Kurama made the decision for him. "Oh, I have eidetic memory and I can show you this memory in much better detail anytime you want. You might as well use the 10 seconds to get farther away from this crazy female. She's serious about hunting you down like an animal. Or a fox in our case." He didn't need any further prodding as he immediately disappeared back into the bushes, leaving the naked woman alone. For some reason, Anko felt a little annoyed. That baka. The least he should have done is spend at least 2 more seconds taking in my sexy ass. I feel a little insulted. But, he likes my hair. She thought with a giggle as she counted down from 10, then slowly got dressed. She might as well make it a little more challenging for herself by taking her time. Despite the stupid orange outfit, that brat could really hide if given enough time. Another few weeks later, Naruto was panting heavily as he hid himself underneath a thick pile of leaves on the ground somewhere in the forest around the training ground. Damn those two. They had to forbid my use of the transparent escape jutsu. I was beginning to have an easy time hiding from Anko-sensei, and now they rack up the difficulty. Not my problem. Besides, it would be boring for me to watch you cruise through your training. I want to hear your screams of pain and see your terrified expressions. Kurama cackled evilly. "You're such a great friend," he retorted sarcastically. "Fine. I'll help you out a little. She's behind you." Boo! His insides went cold as he felt a slender hand slip around his neck before he was pulled up out of the leaves in a headlock with a kunai pointed at his face. He gulped. "Hello there, sexy," Anko whispered from behind into his ear in a breathy and seductive tone, making him blush despite the deadly kunai pointing a few inches from his face. "You've been caught, and so soon too. You relied too much on that jutsu, so we're going to keep this up until you're at an acceptable level," she whispered in a disappointed tone, before smirking sinisterly. "But I am going to give you an incentive," she mysteriously said before twitching her kunai, cutting into the boy's cheek, making him cry out more in surprise than pain. What the F dash? The word died in his throat as he felt something wet slide across the cut, lapping up the blood that flowed out. His body jolted with electricity as he felt Anko's tongue move across his whiskered cheek seductively. I really like her. I might actually even love her a tiny bit. Not helping, that's delicious. Which means bad news for you, Gaki. I'm going to be much more motivated to catch you and cut you each time I find you so I can taste more of this blood. So you'd better be more motivated than I am if you're going to overcome this. Anko intoned seductively next to his ear before she let him go to disappear into the trees. You have 10 minutes before I go after your ass again. You'd better improve your time or a small cut will be the least of your worries. Her voice called out from high up in the trees. Naruto's body shivered at what just happened. I have mixed feelings about this. I should be really disturbed by this, but for some reason there's this other feeling I can't comprehend. That's called puberty. Now hurry and hide if you want to survive with most of your chastity still intact. Sometime later on one evening, bored, Naruto drawled out in his mind for the 10th time that night. Jiraiya and Anko were sleeping peacefully in their cots. Shut up, you annoying asshole. I told you before we're done with the training in your mindscape for the night, and any more than that would be counterproductive. It's not my fault you're having a bout of insomnia this evening. I know. I just can't do anything loud without waking these two up. I'm not risking waking Anko-sensei up after last time. Who knew someone as sleepy as her could aim so well when she was going for my balls? He looked around the shack with his enhanced night vision before his sight came upon a small pile of books sitting by Jiraiya's cot. The blonde then quietly got out of his bed and snuck over to look through them for anything to read. He frowned in annoyance after a few seconds. Figures all that damn pervert would have here is porn. Can you read that volume? Kurama piped up with some shyness in her voice. If Naruto saw her right now, he would have seen her acting a little bashful with a blush that was somehow visible through her crimson fur. While I'm a little weirded out by that sudden request, I have to point out that's a more recent volume. Wouldn't you be better off reading the early volumes if you were interested in this? I've already read them. That's the next one I want to read. Naruto blinked in confusion. Wait, how could you have read these books if you were inside me all this time? Kurama remained silent as she let it sink in for the poor blonde. Oh. My. Kami. I was born from a pervert. A big-time one. Kurama admitted as Naruto took the time to process this information slowly, lest he would have screamed in terror otherwise. Please tell me Dad was the perfect example of a normal man. Don't let both of my parents be perverts. That was just a public face he put on. He was just as big of a pervert as Kushina was behind closed doors. Kurama replied as she blushed at the memories of some of the kinkier stuff her previous container did. No. 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 I'm going to kill Ero-sennin in his sleep before he corrupts me too. Naruto cried out inwardly before he was about to make good on his threat as he slowly took out a kunai. Despite his best efforts, it wasn't the old pervert that corrupted them. It was your mother who turned Minato to the dark side. Naruto almost dropped his kunai in despair before he put it back. After a long moment of thought, he reached down to pick up the book Kurama wanted. I figured you would be so disturbed by the revelations you'd swear these books off for good. Not that I'm complaining. Naruto sighed inwardly as he quietly made his way back to his cot and laid down to crack open the orange book. Can't beat them. Might as well join them. I'm going to see what's so great about these books. Early next morning Jiraiya yawned as he sat up in his cot and looked around. His eyes bulged out as he found Naruto lying in his cot reading one of his infamous orange books. He was about to ask what was going on before he was stopped by his godson snapping the book closed. The older man could see the young teen had some red tinge on his cheeks. Despite the oddness of a 12-year-old reading one of his books, he was curious. So how do you like it? He whispered for fear of waking Anko. He still wondered how someone that sleepy could have perfect aim toward any man's crotch. Naruto glanced over at his godfather with brief surprise before he shrugged. I was reading it for the fox. Apparently she likes your works. Jiraiya had to take a moment to let it sink in that the most powerful entity in the world enjoyed his works. Then he shook that absurdness off. I see. And your opinion? He smirked as he saw the red tinge return to the boy's cheeks. The storyline was interesting. The smut scenes, not so much. They were boring to me. Naruto figured his godfather would have taken offense to that, but he was surprised to see him nod in understanding. That seems to be the common complaint most of the younger readers have about my series. Recently, the editor admitted I was using old-fashioned words that didn't appeal to them. Naruto just shrugged, not having too much sympathy for his godfather's situation. How about this? You already have the mentality of a young 18-something and you're smart, so maybe you can help me with something? Jiraiya leaned in with a whisper. The blonde raised an eyebrow, wondering what the old pervert was thinking. A couple hours later, Mitarashi Anko was filled with dread. When she woke up this morning, she thought it was going to be a nice off day from training for her. She would just take a long stroll in the forest and enjoy the nature, then come back to play with Naruto-san before eating and going back to sleep. However, she felt like she stepped into an alternate universe as she watched Naruto and Jiraiya sit across from each other at a patio table, shaded by a large umbrella, as they read through piles of papers and was bickering over which term needed to be replaced or not in Jiraiya's next porn novel. What topped it off for her was that they were wearing old-fashioned bifocal glasses and acting like they were squinting while reading through these papers. Flower petal isn't something young people like me would care to empathize with, and we just think you're being a moron for dancing around and avoiding using more direct terms like pussy, Naruto argued. How dare you, Gaki? It's much more romantic to a reader's soul to read these terms. It would be too raw and visceral otherwise if I wrote it more directly, Jiraiya retorted. Look, Ero-sennin, you said you want to update your terminology to pull in younger readers. I'm trying to help you out with that. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Time out! A female voice interrupted the two males, who snapped to the source to find a seriously disturbed-looking Anko standing there. Okay, here's the deal. I'm going to think I stepped into a different dimension for the moment, and just assume my version of Jiraiya-sama and the Gaki are doing their normal stupid things while I'm stuck here in this pocket of alternate reality. In my world, a 12-year-old is certainly not arguing with a porn writer over terms to use in the next smut book. Anko calmly spoke with a dangerously twitching eyebrow. The two males glanced at each other nervously as the purple-haired woman pointed into the forest surrounding the training field. I'm going to take a long walk out there and I'm going to come back in 5 hours. By then, everything will be back to normal for me. Otherwise I'm going to have to slit your throats for the good of mankind. Anko spoke the last sentence with a dangerous glint in her eyes. The two men began sweating comically as their female companion stalked off. They flinched when she stopped in her track and snapped back to them with a question. What's with the glasses? Both of you can hit a bullseye 50 meters away without even trying. The two men glanced at each other briefly before shrugging. For the atmosphere, they both stated at the same time as they adjusted their glasses haughtily. Anko took in an annoyed intake of breath and nodded slowly before walking again. Right. This is a really fucked up alternate reality, she concluded as she disappeared into the trees. The men glanced at each other once more before breaking down laughing. End of training trip on the way back to Konoha. Oh boys, I've noticed something, Anko announced in an annoyed tone as she walked a few steps behind her male companions on the dirt road. They stiffened a little. Why are we going to the Valley of the End? That's out of the way. Naruto tried to stall. I'm not stupid, Gaki. I know that was where the Kyuubi fought with the first Hokage. You're thinking about checking the area for any residual chakra left over, aren't you? Anko growled. She did not want to see Naruto put himself through the painful absorption process again. Anko-sensei, you know why I'm doing this, the blonde stated firmly. That you're going to put yourself through the meat grinder again. You have no idea how helpless I felt seeing you in extreme agony at the ceiling sight. How relieved I was when you finally fell asleep peacefully. And that was before I spent the whole summer getting to know you and we became good friends. What good is getting stronger to protect your precious ones if you're going to hurt the same people because they had to watch you push yourself past your limits? Anko raised her voice at her blonde friend, who glared back at her in annoyance. I made a promise that I'll be the strongest shinobi in the village to protect my loved ones. I would do anything aside from evil things to reach that goal. One of the lessons you gave me over the summer is that a shinobi makes use of any tool available to him. Well, I see the Yin-infused chakra as something to help me get stronger. That way, I can add one more option to defeating my enemies. So what if I go through a little bit of pain to obtain it? It's the same as training yourself to exhaustion, and then rebuilding the destroyed body for the next day. Anko growled in frustration upon seeing his stubbornness out in full force. She knew she wasn't going to make him change his mind about this. She whirled on her feet and made her way down a different path from the one the men were taking. Fine. I'm going on to the village. I'm not going to stick around and watch you cry like a pussy each time you do that stupid absorption thing. It's pathetic. She shouted over her shoulder. Oh, that's bullshit. You took great pleasure in cutting me up over the summer as training. You even have a fetish for my blood. You just want to get out of here so we wouldn't catch you getting off on seeing me in pain. Fuck you, pussy. Back at you, bloodsucker. Naruto breathed heavily as he watched Anko disappear down the dirt path. Ah, lovers spat. Once you've seen one, you've seen them all. Jiraiya said sagely after remaining silent throughout the entire exchange. Naruto glared over at him in annoyance as they began their walk again toward the Valley of the End. What part of this is a lover's spat? I agree with the old pervert on this. You're outvoted 2-1. I might be the Hokage in the future and it's a dictatorship. Overruled. Kurama scoffed at her container's childish response. Alright, let's just go to the valley and get this shit over with. Naruto declared after taking a deep breath to clear his head of Anko for the moment. However, he couldn't help but wonder if he might have hurt his friendship with her. He could only hope the bond was stronger than that. 6 hours later on the same road in the opposite direction. I can't believe you forced yourself to do it 6 times. I know it was a huge area and you had to do it multiple times to get all the chakra there, but even I think you pushed yourself a bit too far with that, Gaki. Jiraiya spoke over his shoulder to an exhausted Naruto riding on his back. At least the chakra's potency went down over the years, so it didn't hurt enough to knock me out each time. The blonde murmured back. Thank Kami for the small miracles, the godfather retorted sarcastically. Even with all the chakra we found, it wasn't enough to get me over the wall. I need more. Naruto grumbled. Jiraiya sighed and wondered if this new project to control more of the Kyuubi's chakra would end in failure. Over the summer, they discovered, to their dismay, that while it did change some of Naruto's body into characteristics similar to the demon fox inside him, it did not boost his attributes that much more than a chakra shroud of the same level would have. While it was easier to keep control of himself in his shroud, he was now barely managing to keep control in the four-tailed state dash. It wasn't as much progress as he would have liked. However, one bright spot in that setback was Naruto, and Kurama could feel his body adapting more to the Yin essence flowing through it. It felt like his body was simply waiting to absorb enough of that essence before it could evolve to the next step of controlling the demon fox's chakra better. I don't know where else to find more of the fox's chakra. We already had you absorb everything from all the places we know of. The only option is that Orochimaru might have more of the chakra in storage, but that's too risky for you at this moment. Jiraiya explained. I might have some information on where to find more. Huh! You know something? Naruto spoke out loud to let Jiraiya know that Kurama had something of interest to discuss. I wasn't sure if it was worth checking out, but now that we know my chakra could still be around for at least 100 years like at the Valley of the End, it's a viable option. You're saying there's still one more place? Naruto relayed for his godfather's sake. Yes, I'm positive the place will be saturated from top to bottom with my old chakra. I'm speaking of my den in which I've used for hundreds of years before that stinking Uchiha came and found me. Do you know where this den is? It's located in what's now called Land of Iron. It's deep in the mountains there, and the locals never venture that far into the terrain due to the treacherous conditions, so I was never disturbed. Land of Iron, huh? Naruto repeated before he was jolted and nearly knocked off by Jiraiya straightening his back in surprise. Talk about incredible coincidences. He spoke softly in shock. What's the big idea? Naruto yelled as he tightened his grip on his godfather's back. Jiraiya was about to reply before he was stopped by something he saw farther up the road. He then smirked. Look who's still here! He spoke over his shoulder to Naruto. Confused, the blonde perked his head up to see who it was and was surprised to see the familiar purple hair. The men could see Anko crouching down on the side of the road, hugging her knees to herself as if she seemed to be waiting nervously for someone. Anko-sensei! Naruto called out excitedly before he remembered the spat they had, and sobered up quickly. Anko perked her head up at the voice and looked in the male's direction. Her face brightened up a little upon seeing Naruto before she frowned in worry when she noticed him riding on Jiraiya's back, as if he was hurt. She pushed herself up to her feet and waited for the men to make their way down the road to her. At that point, Jiraiya had to sweat drop as he felt like he was in the middle of a stare down between Naruto and Anko as they seemed to be challenging the other to say something first. Before the Toad Sage was about to crack under the pressure, Naruto broke the silence with a regretful sigh. Anko-sensei. I'm sorry for what I said back there. I should be more considerate of your feelings about what I'm doing to myself. Anko sighed as well before smiling slightly. Gaki, I'm sorry too. I should be more supportive of your goals, even if I don't agree with some of the stuff you're doing. They nodded to each other smiling before all three continued their journey back to Konoha with a silent agreement. A lover's reunion. Once you've seen one, you've seen them all. Jiraiya sagely said a few minutes later, chuckling as he felt killing intent from two sources. What part of this is a lover's reunion? Anko and Naruto shouted comically at the same time. Back in Konoha, Naruto stood in front of his apartment building with a frown. It wasn't because there was something wrong with the apartment building. It was precisely what wasn't wrong with it that made him frown. There was absolutely nothing about it to be wrong because the entire building had burned down to the foundations. Not even one piece of wood was left standing. The boy mechanically turned his head from the smoldering pile of ashes to the right to stare blankly up at the slightly sweating visage of the third Hokage. The old man was silently awaiting Naruto's reaction upon seeing his home of 8 years gone. 3 NBU were standing behind him looking like they were trying to hold in their laughter. I'm finding this very suspicious, Hokage-sama. Naruto spoke neutrally as he studied the old man's comically sweating face. Don't be like that, Naruto-kun. The ANBU managed to save everything you hold dear from the building before it burned down, so there is no loss on your part. It's just too bad we cannot find the culprit responsible for this. Naruto swore he saw the Hokage taking everything he had to refrain from putting up air quotes around the word culprit. He also heard one of the ANBU cough 3 times, which sounded suspiciously like I did it. That's precisely why this is suspicious. He rebutted as he held out a scroll with all his belongings sealed into it. In his other hand was an incident report and an inventory list of everything that were saved. They got everything, including the ones I've hidden so well that it would have taken several shinobi hours to find and disable the traps around them. Your ANBU must have balls made of diamond to do that in a building burning down around them. Unless they took their time finding everything over the summer while I was gone, and then the already empty building accidentally caught fire due to. He paused as he glanced down at the incident report. A stray katan jutsu. He finished with a raised eyebrow at the sweating Hokage as the 3 ANBU behind him shifted uncomfortably. Whatever. He said dismissively with a casual shrug, causing everyone around him to face fault, the tension totally gone from the air. Don't do that to this old man's heart. Hiruzen shouted as he got up from the ground. Couldn't help myself, Hokage Gigi. I don't give a crap about this building. I'm just happy you guys took the time to save my stuff. Naruto retorted with a foxy grin. Ahem, due to this unfortunate incident, and the fact that one of my subordinates failed to save one precious item that belonged to you despite his valiant effort. The Hokage paused as the ANBU who coughed earlier stepped forward, feigning regret as he faked wiping a tear from his mask, and held out the other hand to show a burned ramen packet that expired years ago. Naruto raised an eyebrow amusedly at the theatrics. We have decided to compensate you by offering you a room in a newer apartment building close to the tower. It is also populated with tenants who I believe would treat you well despite your unique status. I honestly think you will be much happier there than here, Naruto-kun. The third finished with a bit of a flourish. Naruto had to smile warmly at the extent his surrogate grandfather would go to make his life more comfortable, but frowned as he thought of something. Are you sure, Hokage Gigi? Once the villagers find out, they'll try to vandalize that building too. He pointed out. What I meant by saying people who treat you well, I meant those who are active within the shinobi force. I would like to meet a villager who would risk vandalizing a building full of active shinobi, because that person would have giant balls of steel. Either that or he's so stupid I would need to have the medics crack him open for research. The Hokage said bluntly. Naruto chuckled. Thank you, Hokage Gigi. It's going to be nice to have a hot shower after so long. That reminds me. Your rent will include the utilities, so it will not be possible for any utility company to cut you off this time, or they'd have to deal with a building full of angry shinobi. Alright. Show me the place. Naruto exclaimed as he walked off with the Hokage and the escorts toward the new apartment. Later at the new apartment, it's a bit smaller, but I'll take it, Naruto declared as he flopped down on the couch provided with the apartment. This apartment was similar in design to his old place, only newer, and both living room and kitchen were somewhat smaller compared to the old place. Moving on up in the world, I suppose? Kurama said with a smirk. Naruto took a few minutes to enjoy taking in his new surroundings before he heard a knock at the front door. Grumbling and wondering who it was, he slowly got up from the couch to open the door. He was surprised to see Anko and Yugao standing there with housewarming gifts. "Yo, Gaki! The news spread throughout this building that we have our favorite blonde as our newest neighbor," Anko said with a smirk as she pushed her way in. Yugao politely bowed before entering. "Yeah, seems like my old apartment had an unfortunate accident with a katan jutsu," Naruto replied with some sarcasm as he offered for them to sit on the couch in the living room. The women chuckled. "You should be happy. Yugane told me what kind of place it was from when she broke into it." Anko said the last few words pointedly as she glared at her older sister, who blushed at being found out. "I'll get some tea for you ladies if you'd like," Naruto offered, and the women nodded. A few minutes later, he came back with cups for the women. Yugao took a sip and smiled happily at how good it tasted. Naruto was surprised to see Anko taking her cup of tea seriously as she took a careful sip as if to test it critically, before sipping it some more in a casual manner, and smiled in appreciation. Seeing Naruto's raised eyebrow, Yugao decided to explain. "Anko-chan is big on tea ceremonies, and that reaction means she likes your tea. You should see her in her formal kimono when she feels like doing a ceremony. She looks so adorable," she teased as Anko's face turned red. "At least it's better than cleaning all of your swords all day. It's hell keeping the smell of that cleaning oil out of my clothes," she shot back. Naruto chuckled at the sisters' bickering. "I look forward to seeing you perform a ceremony someday, Anko-sensei. I'm sure you'd look elegant," he complimented with a sincere smile. He was surprised to see Anko suddenly looking bashful. She nodded shyly before quietly sipping some more out of her cup as she avoided speaking more about this subject. It was apparent she didn't share her hobbies often. "Gaki, just call me Anko-chan already. Next to Yugane and Nai-chan, you know me better than the rest of the village combined. I'm only your sensei when I'm teaching you something," she blurted out a moment later with a small blush on her cheeks as she averted her gaze, finding the floor interesting. Yugao had to hide a happy smile as she thought the summer trip with Naruto did her little sister some good. Naruto nodded with a warm smile. "I'd be happy to, Anko-chan." A few months later during the fall, at Training Ground 42 just turned 13, Naruto was enjoying the crisp fall air as he stood outside in the middle of the leaves-covered training ground. He took in a deep breath through his nose, relishing the mixture of earthy scents his sensitive nose picked up. He raised an eyebrow, though, when he smelled a slight tinge of lavender mixed in. Glancing over to his left in slow motion, he saw a flash of indigo before he focused on the beautiful and smiling face of Hyuga Hinata. She seemed to be moving toward him in slow motion, her long and silky hair whipping around behind her agonizingly slow in the fall breeze. Naruto then noticed Hinata's open hands slowly going up in front of her in the classic Hyuga attacking pose. Confused, he checked Hinata's face again only to see it wasn't a smile she was displaying, it was a smirk as she had her Byakugan active. "Oh right. I'm in the middle of a spar." On that cue, he saw his own closed left fist appear into his vision, tense and coiled as if ready to unleash against the poor girl. Rather, the poor girl who was about to painfully jab most of his tenketsu closed if he didn't do something. So unleash it he did. With a sharp whoosh, his left arm was fully extended into a powerful jab in an instant, and it would have struck Hinata's delicate face if she hadn't slipped past by a hair's width thanks to her eyes. The only piece of her Naruto managed to get with that punch was her hair as it punched through the wall of dark blue. He noted at this point that her hair felt extremely silky sliding around his extended fist, at least before he was jolted by pain moving up through his arm. In a flash, the confidently smirking Hinata took advantage of his miss and managed to close several of his tenketsu in the arm in a flowing movement using her newly developed personal style of juken. Taking that as his cue to retreat, Naruto leaped back to gain some distance from the dangerous Hyuga with his left arm hanging limply at his side. "You got him, Hinata-chan! Victory is ours!" a female voice exclaimed from the right. Naruto shifted his gaze between the smirking Hinata and the source of the voice, who turned out to be Ino, as she celebrated what she thought was a sure victory. "Troublesome. Ino, you know even without his left arm, Naruto is a dangerous foe. We need to be cautious." Shikamaru's voice spoke up from next to Ino. Naruto wasn't sure, but he thought he forgot someone else. That someone else deemed this moment to be the right time to remind the blonde with a cry of Byuban Baika no Jutsu, partial expansion, before a giant fist smashed into him from behind. The blonde let out a grunt of pain as he was sent flying forward, trying everything he did to recover in midair. He barely managed to right himself as he landed on the ground, forced into a pincer position between Hinata and the Ino and Shikamaru pair. What the hell hit me? He grunted as he struggled to stay on his feet. If he collapsed to the ground, it would be his loss according to the rules for this spar. He only had time to realize the person that hit him was Choji before he froze in place. He struggled to break free of whatever was holding him before he saw a long shadow leading from his feet up to a pineapple-haired boy. Kage main no jutsu, shadow possession, success! Shikamaru declared with a smirk. Yes! We finally got him! It took 4 against 1 but we got him! Ino hopped up and down in place next to Shikamaru, cheering. I apologize for the sneak attack, Naruto, but Shika put me in place to attack you when you weren't paying attention. Kind and gentle Choji bowed his head in apology as he walked up next to Ino and Shikamaru, though a small confident smile could be seen on his face. Hinata still remained on high alert as she watched for anything from Naruto even though he was trapped in the shadow jutsu. Her eyes were still blaring as she searched for any change in her blonde friend's chakra network, and she remained in an aggressive kata. Hinata-chan, you don't have to worry. It's over. Ino called out to the Hyuga heiress. The indigo-haired teenage girl smiled knowingly. Until I hear Naruto-kun say I surrender, we should not let our guards down. I'm going to disable the rest of his limbs. Continue to hold him in place please, Shikamaru-san. Troublesome, grumbled the shadow user as he strained to keep the powerful blonde in place. All 4 fighters stiffened a little at hearing their captured prey chuckle lightly. You're right to be wary of me, Hinata-chan. Shika, out of the jutsu I managed to master by now, I can do one of them without seals even though it took a lot of effort to be able to reach that point. Can you guess what it is? Shikamaru widened his eyes before he frantically glanced around the battleground for any clue to his opponent's next tactic. He's generating a large amount of wind chakra in his system. Hinata warned as she dashed in to try to disable their opponent. Your shadow jutsu can hold me in place, but it can't control my chakra when I don't need hand seals. Naruto stated with a smirk as his gaze shifted down for an instant. Shikamaru realized something and glanced down at the ground covered with dead leaves. The leaves! Everyone, run! Get away from the leaves! At that moment, just when Hinata was about to reach Naruto, the blonde expelled a large blast of chakra-generated wind from his body in all directions. The gust was strong enough to kick all the leaves high up into the air all around the 5 combatants. Hinata let out a yelp of surprise as some leaves hit her face, stopping her dead in her track. The other 3 fighters glanced around in surprise. I've got to hold Naruto in his place. I can't let the leaves distract us, Shikamaru thought as he tried to keep his jutsu in place. However, he received a shock to his system when he felt his control slip and the jutsu dissipated, as if Naruto simply vanished from his hold. He looked up to see the blonde now standing next to the surprised Hinata, who tried to strike at him, but he deflected it with his right arm and pushed her to the ground with a hard shove to her abdomen, and Shikamaru's heart sank. Because of the spar's rule of a fall to the ground being considered a knockout, Naruto's strongest opponent, Hinata, was out. Straining to see through the still floating leaves, he tried to keep an eye on the blonde to see what he was going to do next, but he was stunned to see him vanish into thin air. He heard a feminine cry to the right before looking over to see Naruto easily judo flip Ino to the ground. He disappeared again and the shadow user heard a grunt to his left. Shikamaru shifted his gaze to see Naruto easily throwing the larger Choji over his shoulder to the ground with his one good arm. At this point, an annoyed smirk grew on the Nara's lips. That troublesome bastard. He's mastered Kawarimi, substitution, to this level. To be able to substitute with something as small as a floating leaf without seals. The shadow user concluded this much before his troublesome friend appeared in front of him out of thin air, the blonde's usable right arm outstretched to prepare for a throw. These mischievous blue eyes and that insufferable foxy grin were visible even through the thick cloud of floating leaves. 5 minutes later. I hate you! Ino grumbled with her cheeks puffed in anger. Hinata joined in with her own puffed cheeks too. They were glaring pointedly away from a sweat-dropping Naruto. Troublesome! Shikamaru snorted from his lying position on the ground nearby. He still hadn't moved from when Naruto threw him to finish the spar. At least his friend was nice enough to have left him facing up so he didn't have to expend the energy to roll over. What a great friend he was. Choji was sitting next to him pleasantly eating out of his bag of chips. If he had any frustration from losing to Naruto, he was hiding it very well. He deserved to win because we let our guards down. Hinata was the only one who did right by being on guard from start to finish. We just didn't back her up quickly enough because of our complacency upon trapping Naruto," Shikamaru pointed out. Hinata dropped her puffed cheeks as she looked over at the pineapple-haired boy in surprise before blushing slightly. "Ano, it is because I am so used to sparring with Naruto-kun over the years. He never gives up each battle until he had no option. I hate this. I thought when we started learning our clan jutsu this year, we'd have a chance to win," Ino complained as she glared heatedly at Naruto, who put his hands up in a placating gesture. Inwardly, he was happy to see Ino had adopted a new attitude about wanting to win against him now. In the past, she usually gave up and accepted her losses to him because she felt she wasn't as talented as him. Lately she was picking up her training, and now busting through her old limitations. He couldn't wait for the day when she caught up. "You almost did get me. Just don't give me too much time to think up a way out of any situation, and it might be you who ends up winning," Naruto tried to appeal to his fellow blonde, before quickly moving on to the next subject. "Anyway, I got some treats for you guys. My neighbor, Anko-chan, gave me some leftovers she got from her favorite dango shop. I can't stand too much sweets, so I thought I'd see if any of you wanted to eat any before I give them away to some local kids," Naruto announced as he took out a scroll. Upon hearing the word sweets, Ino's bad mood changed completely to one of excitement as she rushed to his side with sparkling eyes, eagerly awaiting her portion. Everyone's sweat dropped at the sudden change. Naruto noted offhandedly that Hinata seemed a little excited too as he unsealed the scroll to show a decent selection of sweets. Ino smiled brightly as she grabbed several chocolate chips cookies while Choji was happy to pick out a piece of angel food cake. Shikamaru ignored the treats as he opted to do some cloud watching instead. Naruto watched as Hinata picked something out of the pile and looked over it with curiosity. "Naruto-kun, what is this? I don't believe I have tried this before," she inquired as she held her piece up for him to see. "Oh, that's a cinnamon bun. I don't usually eat one of these, but you might like it. Give it a try." Hayashi's home. A cold shiver went down one hair to Hayashi's back as he dropped some paperwork onto his desk out of shock. He took a deep steadying breath to make sense of that awful feeling. "I feel a great disturbance in the clan's balance sheet. It is as if many thousands of Ryo cried out in terror only to be silenced by a new and insatiable addiction. I have not felt this since Hitomi-chan discovered red bean paste. And why do I feel the need to strangle Naruto-san?" Back with Naruto and the gang, Naruto didn't know what to say as he watched in stunned silence. Choji was still like a stone, his mouth wide open as he was forking in a piece of his cake. Ino had a hand up to her mouth in shock and her pale skin was slowly turning bright red. Shikamaru raised himself half off the ground on his elbows, his eyes wide in shock as his face turned red too. Why were they all like this? It was because they were watching Hinata eating her first ever cinnamon bun passionately as if it was her lover. Naruto watched in morbid fascination as he saw his best friend of 5 years slowly lick all the icing off the bun lustily as she panted heavily. She let out an occasional blissful shudder as her wet tongue licked up some of the extra icing. All the while her eyes were glazed and half-lidded as if she was in pure ecstasy. With all the icing gone, she bit into the buns slowly and sensually, moaning softly with each painfully slow bite until she finally ate it all. She then desperately licked and sucked loudly on her fingers for any leftover icing before releasing each finger with a loud pop. Her 4 friends were still in shock at what they just saw of this shy and supposedly innocent girl. She slowly turned her head toward Naruto, her desperate expression making him flinch, before he was suddenly tackled to the ground with her straddling him. She was clenching on tightly to Naruto's jacket, panting and trembling as if she just had an orgasm. She lowered her flushed and desire-filled face to within inches of his, close enough that Naruto thought she was going to kiss him, and for some reason, he found himself happily welcoming it. However, it was not to be as he heard a faint and breathy whisper. "More." "Yes, Hinata-chan?" he whispered as he strained to hear. "I want more of the food of the gods," she murmured with shuddering breaths. Naruto allowed a moment of stupidity to happen when he tried to argue against an unstable Hinata. "Ramen is. Don't argue with me. Take me to where I can find more of these buns of eternal bliss," she growled as she shook him, her Byakugan blaring full force. Why yes ma'am," Naruto nodded frantically before he forced himself up to his feet with the panting girl clutching on tightly to his arm as if she was weak in her knees from pleasure. He let out a sigh as he looked over his 3 shell-shocked friends. If I don't come back alive, tell my plants I love them very much. He saluted before he and Hinata disappeared in a whirl of orange and black leaves, his trademark shunshin, leaving 3 very stunned teens frozen in shock for hours until their brains wiped the memory from their minds and they wondered what they were still doing there. At the dango shop, the duo appeared out of thin air in front of the shop, surprising several outdoor patrons sitting outside enjoying the autumn air. Hinata seemed to have regained some of her composure in the high-speed travel over here, and Naruto was relieved when she only giggled excitedly at the prospect of getting more of the pastry goodness called cinnamon buns. At least she wasn't panting erotically and embarrassing herself in public. As the young teen girl practically skipped up to the counter, he was surprised to hear a familiar voice. Gaki? Don't see you around here often. Naruto turned around to see Anko sitting in a booth across from a young woman he hadn't met before. The new woman was unbelievably beautiful with long and curly raven hair framing her pale and unblemished face. He found her unique red eyes fascinating and her bright red lips were a stark contrast against her pale skin. She was dressed in what looked like bandages wrapped and intertwined together into the shape of a short kimono. The new woman was looking at him with appraising eyes that made him shift uncomfortably. Yeah, Hinata-chan here was about to juken me to death if I don't take her to where she could get more cinnamon buns. Apparently she found her ramen, he explained with emphasis on the word ramen. Anko opened her mouth in a perfect O and nodded in understanding before smirking. Didn't you mean she's found her dango? Really, Anko-chan? Are we going to fight over our own food of the gods again? Nope, we're not. As long as dango is the best in the end. Ano, excuse me. May I ask who they are? Hinata asked shyly as she appeared next to Naruto with her arms full of wrapped cinnamon buns. His eyes bulged out at the amount of the pastry in this petite girl's clutches, but then remembered he regularly ate that much of his ramen. Hinata-chan, this is Mitarashi Anko, a friend of mine and a neighbor as well. She was also my sensei from this past summer. Anko-chan, this is my best friend, Hyuga Hinata. He did his introductions. Meanwhile, Hinata and Anko frowned slightly as they glanced at each other, as if they could tell they were going to step on each other's toes around Naruto. Meanwhile, said Blonde bowed to the raven-haired beauty. My apologies, miss. I'm afraid we haven't met before. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. Just call me Naruto like everyone else. The beautiful Kunoichi smiled gently at the boy's politeness before she spoke. My name is Yuhi Kurenai and I'm Anko-chan's best friend. She's spoken of you a lot, and I want to thank you for saving her from harm a few months ago, she replied with a grateful smile, while Anko blushed slightly at being mentioned talking about Naruto. The blonde put a hand up behind his neck sheepishly. Anko-chan mentioned you a lot over the summer too, and you're welcome, Yuhi-san. Anyone else would have done the same thing in my place though. Take on 3 Chunin and completely destroying them? I'm not so sure, Naruto-san. Also, please call me Kurenai. A friend of Anko-chan is a friend of mine too. If I may be so bold, what did she mean by saving Mitarashi-san? Hinata interjected with a look of confusion. Oh, it happened just before I left for training, so I never got around to telling you. She was being bugged by 3 annoying men, so I put them in their place, Naruto said shortly, not wanting to sound like bragging. Put them in their place? Anko laughed before continuing. Half of one guy's body is still in cast, another has severe post-concussion symptoms, and still can't throw or handle any weapon with his left hand, and the last one will never get rid of his limp. Hinata's eyes widened in surprise before looking worriedly over at Naruto. Wasn't that going too far, Naruto-kun? Not for what they were about to do to Anko-chan, Lady Hinata. Naruto-san left out that particular detail. Kurenai interjected with a slight scowl. Hinata took a sharp intake of breath before nodding in understanding. Seems like you've had the same situation with Gaki here, Lady Hinata. I recall an incident with Kyumo a few years ago, and this guy was the one who saved you. Anko pointed out with a grin. Hinata raised an eyebrow as not many people remembered who saved her after this much time had passed. She was intrigued by the fact that Anko knew that detail off the top of her head, as if she was paying close attention to Naruto's life too. Perhaps you just love saving pretty girls, Gaki? Anko purred at the suddenly bashful Naruto. Hinata almost growled at the way this purple-haired woman was being familiar with her Naruto, and decided to get his attention with hope of leaving. Hee. Don't be like that, Anko-chan. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Naruto replied with an embarrassed blush before he felt a slight tug on the back of his jacket. He took a quick glance behind to see Hinata looking somewhat demure, but it was clear from her expressive pale eyes that she wanted something. Being a little dense, he mistakenly figured she was getting impatient and wanted to go home to eat all of the cinnamon buns in her arms, so he decided to wrap it up. Anyway, I suppose I should leave you ladies alone since I need to walk Hinata-chan home. I'll see you around, Kurenai-san. Enko-chan, see you later. He and Kurenai inclined their heads to each other before casually waving goodbye to Enko as he and Hinata left the shop. Kurenai was impressed with the boy. She knew Uzumaki Naruto warranted special attention when her best friend talked about him so much. I like him. He's nice, polite, and apparently strong too. She pointed out to Enko, who grinned. He's also fun to be around. It never gets boring with him. She replied with a somewhat wistful look in her eyes. Kurenai smirked as she decided to test her friend's reaction. He's also lucky to have the attention of the Hyuga's heiress. It's clear she's got it bad for Naruto-san. She had to fight to keep her smirk from growing when she watched Enko's eyes flash with a hint of envy. Yeah, he is. She replied with a slightly subdued smile. Oh, Enko-chan, you might be having it bad for him too. It's only going to get harder to resist when he becomes a shinobi and you stop seeing him as a child. Kurenai thought. She hoped her friend would be okay if there was any hair break in the future. It wasn't like the two young women would share one man, right? Enko watched the retreating backs of Naruto and Hinata through the shop's window, and her eyes narrowed slightly on the Hyuga heiress as she giggled at something her friend said. She knew Hinata pulled Naruto out of the shop on purpose to get him away from her. That Hyuga girl could be annoying. At the same moment, Hinata glanced back through the Dango shop's window to see Enko chatting with her raven-haired friend. I should be wary around that Mitarashi Enko. First day of the final year at the academy. Finally, today's the beginning of the end. Naruto declared as he stood up in his chair and put a foot up on the desk as if to give out a dramatic speech. His friends and some of the classmates looked up at him. It has been a long and atrocious journey fraught with hazards, fangirls, emo-ness, boring teachers, fangirls, and more fangirls. Most of the classroom chuckled at his humor while some of the girls fumed at being made fun of. One certain raven-haired boy glared at no one in particular over his steepled hands. He knew who that blonde meant with emo-ness. As the class were laughing, they nearly jumped out of their skin when a loud voice filled the room. All right, quiet! It's time for class. The shocked students shifted their attention to the front of the room to see a supersized male head affixed onto a normal-sized body as he shouted. They blinked a few times before seeing that the head had returned to normal size, and they put it out of their minds, thinking it was an illusion. They saw this man was wearing a regular chunin outfit. He had brown hair tied back into pineapple style, and he had a long and distinctive scar running across his nose. He was accompanied by a light blue-haired chunin, who stood quietly at attention next to the scarred man. My name's Yumino Irika. I will be your instructor for your final year here in the academy. This is my assistant Mizuki. He will be helping me with the practical lessons. I look forward to working with each of you, and I wish all of you the best of luck in obtaining your Hitai by this time next year. As this was going on, Naruto decided to check his new teachers out. He sighed and shrugged slightly when he saw the obvious glare of loathing he usually got from others in Mizuki. Moving on to Irika, he locked eyes with the new Chunin sensei. At first Naruto thought he saw the same look of hate, but the scarred man seemed to have fought it down and put up a professional look. He smiled. Perhaps I'll have a little fun this year. I'll have to watch out for this sensei though. A prankster knows another, even an ex-one, and this guy is giving me that wary look. I may actually have some challenge when I do my pranks over the next year. Irika narrowed his eyes on the infamous blonde prankster, showing an innocent smile. He knows I'm going to keep an eye on him. Let's see if he can get any prank done while Yumino Irika is around. As the teacher and the problem student glared at each other challengingly, the entire classroom shivered as if they had a feeling they would be caught in the crossfire of something horrible soon.